Childhood should be sacred territory, a place on the map of memory that you return to with a nostalgic smile, remembering scraped knees from falling off your bike, afternoons of melted ice cream on the sidewalk, and nights of stories under the covers with a flashlight. Mine has a stain, a dark and poisoned area that began to spread during a summer weekend when I was 12 years old, seeping into every corner of my being like ink in clear water. This happened to me when I was a child, a miscalculation in the equation of innocence, and although more than 20 years have passed, exactly 24 if I count from that July 2001, the smell of resinous pine and damp earth after the rain can still transport me back to that hell in the woods, making my pulse race and my mouth dry as if the terror had never ended. My name is Daniel, and back then I was just a skinny kid from Portland, Oregon, with bony knees, brown hair that tangled with summer sweat, and a shyness that made me stutter when adults asked me about my hobbies. I lived in a neighborhood of low houses with unkempt yards and bicycles strewn across porches, the kind of place where kids played outside until the sun went down and mothers called names from back doors. My family was normal. Dad was a mechanic who smelled like motor oil. Mom was a cashier at the local supermarket who always made me peanut butter sandwiches with banana slices. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed, and summers were for barbecues in the backyard and trips to the Willamette River, where I fished for trout that never bit my hook. Scouting had been Dad's idea. "It'll make you a man, Danny," he said one day at dinner, after reading an ad in the local newspaper. "You'll learn knots, campfires, survival, like I did when I was a kid." I nodded, even though the idea of camping with a bunch of strangers made me nervous, but I wanted to please him. Dad wasn't one for effusive displays of affection, and anything that made him smile was worth it. I joined the Silver Falcons, a group of about 20 boys between the ages of 10 and 14 from my school in the neighboring neighborhood, led by Mr. Miller, an older man with a gray mustache and a soft voice who looked like he stepped out of a 1950s movie. Weekly meetings in the church gym, knots with ropes that tangled around my clumsy fingers, merit badges that I collected like trophies. I really liked it. It made me feel part of something bigger, like I belonged to a secret club of explorers. The 2-night campout in the Cascade Mountains was the reward for a year of meetings. "Your first big trip," Mom said, helping me pack the new backpack they bought at the thrift store, olive green with straps that rubbed against my shoulders. It was stuffed to the brim with what she insisted I needed: extra socks, 6 pairs, in case you get wet. A flashlight with fresh batteries, don't trust the old ones. Mosquito repellent spray, those bugs will eat you alive. A thermos with instant soup, in case the camp doesn't feed you well. And a letter sealed in an envelope. "Read this if you feel lonely. I love you, Mom." All I wanted was freedom. A multi-purpose knife Dad gave me. "Be careful, don't cut anything alive." A compass that spun wildly in my pocket. And the Scout handbook with pages marked in the sections on campfires and stars. "It's going to be epic," I told my best friend in the group, Tommy, in the park 2 days earlier, throwing a baseball that always got away from me. He laughed. "Yeah, but don't get lost. You're terrible with maps." The van ride was a cacophony of laughter and silly songs that no one ever finished. There were 20 of us crammed into 2 rental vehicles, backpacks piled in the trunk like war gear, the air thick with the smell of teenage sweat and mint gum. Mr. Miller drove ours, humming Scout hymns in his hoarse voice, while the boys shouted, "9 weeks," a made-up song about a camp that lasted forever. I sat in the middle between Tommy and a new boy named Joshua, who kept telling bad jokes about bears. Amid the commotion, I remember one of the assistant leaders, Mr. Evans, sitting in the front seat turning around occasionally to shout, "Keep it down, Hawks, or no marshmallows." He wasn't the main scoutmaster, Mr. Miller, with his fatherly calm and stories of camps in the 1970s. Mr. Evans was younger, maybe 25, with short blonde hair and a square jaw that made him look like a model from an outdoor clothing catalog. He had an easy smile and contagious energy that made all the boys admire him, even me, who used to hide during meetings. He knew all the knots by name. This is a fisherman's knot, perfect for fish hooks. He could start a fire with 2 sticks and some dry bark. Look, Hawks, friction is magic. And he told stories of adventures that left us speechless. Once in the Rockies, I fought a cougar with only a knife. I won. He paid special attention to me, a shy and somewhat clumsy boy who got tangled up in ropes and stuttered when reciting the scout oath. "Come on, Daniel, you can do that knot," he would say, standing next to me at meetings and guiding my fingers with his own large, calloused ones. "You're smart. You just need confidence." At that moment, I felt chosen, important, as if he saw something in me that the other leaders ignored. We arrived at the camp at noon, the sun filtering through the tops of the pine trees like rays from a natural cathedral. The place was idyllic, a clearing next to a crystal-clear lake that reflected the blue sky, surrounded by tall Douglas firs, whispering in the gentle breeze, the air heavy with that fresh smell of resin and damp earth that now turns my stomach. We unloaded our backpacks in organized chaos, boys running, leaders shouting orders, and Mr. Miller divided us into patrols to set up the tents. Mine was a group of 4. Tommy, Joshua, a quiet boy named Sam, and me. Mr. Evans offered to help our patrol, kneeling on the muddy ground to hammer in stakes. "Come on, Hawks, make a perfect square. Daniel, you hold this end." His hands brushed mine as he passed me the canvas, a brief touch that I didn't think anything of at the time, but which I now remember as the first thread of a spider's web. We set up the tent in half an hour, a green rectangle that smelled of new canvas, and Mr. Evans patted me on the shoulder. "Good job, kid. We're counting on you for the campfire tonight." His tent, I noticed, was located right next to ours, separated only by a meter of trampled grass. The zipper of his front door aligned with the rear window of mine. On the first night, around the central campfire, a circle of stones with flames crackling high, sending sparks into the starry sky. Everything was magical, a balm for my rookie nerves. We roasted marshmallows on sharpened sticks, the sugar caramelizing into golden bubbles that we deliberately burned to laugh at the blackened faces. And Mr. Miller told us a local legend about a forest spirit who guided the lost but devoured the foolish. The boys cheered, Tommy throwing a marshmallow at Joshua that landed in his hair, and I felt like I belonged, the heat of the flames driving away the cold that was beginning to descend from the mountains. But at one point, while laughing at a joke Sam made about a scout who mistook a raccoon for a bear, I felt a gaze fixed on me. It wasn't the casual gaze of a fellow circle member, but intense, heavy, like a weight on the back of my neck that made me tingle. I followed its path through the smoke and the faces lit by the fire, and found myself looking into the eyes of Mr. Evans, sitting 2 benches away, a half-eaten marshmallow in his hand. He wasn't smiling like the others. He was just watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger, it wasn't amusement, but something hungry, as if he were measuring something in me. I quickly looked away, focusing on the fire, my heart beating a little faster, attributing it to the heat or the sugar. "You're imagining things," I told myself, but the tingling didn't go away. The next day, Saturday, activities began early, with the sun just rising over the lake. The cool air laden with dew dampening my sneakers. Canoeing on the lake, the first event of the day, with red aluminum boats splashing against the dock. Mr. Miller divided us into groups of 4 per boat, and Mr. Evans was assigned to ours. "I'll row with these promising falcons," sitting in the stern while Tommy and Joshua fought over the bow. I was in the middle, the clumsy oar in my hands, water splashing my legs. As we rowed toward the center of the lake, the water smooth as a mirror broken by our strokes, his attention toward me became more palpable, a weight I felt on my back. "Daniel, your oar is crooked," he said, leaning forward to correct my technique, his large hands covering mine on the wooden handle. The contact was firm, his calloused fingers brushing mine, and he lingered too long, guiding the movement with deliberate slowness. Like this, push with your shoulder, not your wrist. His breath, hot and moist with the smell of mint gum, reached my neck as he leaned in, the boat rocking slightly. Good, kid. You've got strength. I tried to move away a little, shifting position on the narrow seat, but space was limited. The boat only 5 feet long and his knees brushed against mine. Tommy joked up front. Joshua, you row like a grandmother. Oblivious, but I stiffened, the oar weighing like lead in my hands. The outing, which should have been exciting with the water splashing and the sun warming my face, turned into slow torture, each touch from him. Adjust the angle, Daniel. Like a small electric shock of discomfort that made me clench my teeth. We returned to the dock, sweaty and laughing, Tommy splashing Joshua with the paddle, but lunch in the clearing was a short respite. Tuna sandwiches Mom had wrapped in wax paper, chewed on a log while Mr. Miller announced the hike along the trail. 2 miles, Hawks. You'll learn about local flora. The group spread out on the narrow path, muddy from the previous night's rain, tall pines closing in like green walls. Mr. Evans managed to walk right behind me, his presence a warmth on my back that made me quicken my pace. On a narrow, slippery stretch, where the mud sucked at my boots, I stumbled on an exposed root, and his hand flew to my back to help me keep my balance. Careful, Daniel. But his hand slid slowly, too low, until it rested on my butt and squeezed lightly. His fingers sinking into the fabric of my cargo shorts for a second that stretched on forever. I froze, the cold mud against my sneakers, my heart rising to my throat. Watch out for the mud, kid, he said, his voice normal, casual, as if nothing had happened, and he withdrew his hand with a pat on my shoulder. We don't want you to fall. But his eyes, when I looked over my shoulder, had a gleam that was not one of amusement or paternal concern. It was something dark, possessive. I kept walking, my legs shaking, mud sticking to my socks. Was it an accident? I repeated that to myself, instinct screaming but logic whispering, he's a leader. Adults don't do that. Tommy ahead joked with Joshua about a chirping bird, oblivious, and I swallowed the lump in my throat, speeding up to join them, the squeeze burning like a brand on my skin. The afternoon brought Capture the Flag, a chaos of shouting and running in the camp clearing, red and blue cloth flags tied to trees. Mr. Miller blew the whistle to start, and the teams launched themselves, me in blue, running between fallen logs and thorny bushes that tore my shorts. Mr. Evans was on my team, but his role was to hunt the Reds, and he chased me specifically, with a determination he didn't have with the other boys. Gotcha, Hawk, he shouted, his voice laughing, but his eyes fixed on my back as I zigzagged. The others ran free, Tommy heeding behind an oak tree, Joshua climbing a low log, but he followed me, closing the distance with every turn. Finally, he caught me in a thick bush at the edge of the clearing, out of sight of the others, green leaves closing like a curtain, and knocked me to the muddy ground, his heavy body falling on top of mine, pinning me down with one arm on my chest and his knees on either side of me. He didn't tag me right away, the red rag in his hand hanging forgotten. He was panting, his face inches from mine, sweat dripping from his forehead onto my cheek. I've got you, he whispered, and his voice wasn't playful. It was hoarse, intimate, his weight pressing down on my slim torso. His free hand rested on my shoulder, slowly sliding down my arm, his fingers brushing my exposed skin where my t-shirt had ridden up. Panic flooded me, a coldness that paralyzed my muscles, the cold mud against my back. I tried to struggle, pushing my hands against his chest. Let me go. You got me. But he didn't move, his gaze dropping to my mouth, his hot breath smelling of mint and exertion. Shh, Daniel, just a game. Stay still. His hand slid to my waist, his fingers sinking into the fabric, and something inside me snapped, the animal instinct screaming. You've got me. Let me go, I yelled, my voice coming out shrill, broken with fear, kicking in the mud that splattered his pants. Chaos erupted. Tommy heard the scream and ran over, "Daniel, what's going on?" And Mr. Evans jumped up, his face shifting from possession to feigned surprise. "Calm down, kid. We were just playing." But my scream had alerted the group. Flashlights came on in the clearing, voices shouting, "Daniel!" And he backed away, the red rag in his hand as an excuse. "Nice try, Hawk. Back on the team." He walked away, but his sidelong glance was a promise. This isn't over. I returned to the clearing trembling, mud on my face and hands, Tommy asking, "What did he do to you?" "You look scared." "Nothing, he just threw me hard," I lied, the lump in my throat choking the truth. The game continued, but I played mechanically, my eyes scanning the forest for his return. That afternoon, hell turned personal in the survival session, where Mr. Evans taught us how to purify water with iodine tablets. He divided us into pairs to practice, and of course, he assigned me as his partner. Daniel and I will do the advanced demo. While the other boys boiled water in pots over small campfires, he led me to a secluded stream, a bubbling trickle of water 100 yards from the main camp, out of sight of the dense pine trees. "Here we are alone to concentrate," he said, sitting down on a flat rock beside me, taking the tablets out of his pocket. "We're going to try a more advanced method," he said, showing me the jar, his knee brushing mine in the narrow space. The contact was unbearable, a heat rising up my leg, but I pretended to focus on the bottle I was filling from the stream, the cold water splashing my fingers. As he explained, 1 tablet per liter, wait 30 minutes. He sat very close, his thigh pressed against mine, the wait deliberate. Then, as I was supposed to be putting the tablet in the bottle, his left hand flew to my right thigh, resting just above the knee, his fingers slowly spreading upward, sinking into the flesh through the shorts. "You're a very special boy, Daniel," he murmured, his voice a venomous thread beneath the whisper of the water, his eyes fixed on my face. "Very mature for your age, I can see that. You're different from the others. More sensitive." Panic froze me, the bottle trembling in my hand, water spilling out. His hand moved up another inch, his fingers tightening, and instinct screamed. "No, don't touch me," I managed to say, my voice a shaky whisper, backing away on the rock until I almost fell into the stream. He withdrew his hand, but his expression hardened slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Don't be like that. I'm just being friendly. It's good for a young man to have a mentor, someone to guide you." The word mentor sounded false and dirty, as if he spat it out with a double meaning that I didn't fully understand, but that turned my stomach. I got up unsteadily, spilling the entire bottle into the mud. "I have to go. My head hurts." He got up too, blocking my way for a second. "Daniel, this can be our little secret. The other boys wouldn't understand our special friendship. It would be ours. Only ours." His hand brushed my arm as he said it, a touch that lasted too long, and I fled, running down the path back to camp, my heart pounding, branches whipping my face. I arrived at the clearing panting, the boys practicing knots on a log, Mr. Miller shouting instructions. I hid in the tent, curled up in my sleeping bag, cold sweat on my back. Tell him? To whom? Mr. Miller seemed distant, busy with the older kids. My campmates were kids like me. They wouldn't understand. Tommy came in later. "Where were you?" "Evan said you felt sick." "Yeah, upset stomach," I lied, the lump in my throat choking the truth. "Don't tell him anything." But the secret weighed heavy, an anvil on my chest. The rest of the day was a waking nightmare. At dinner, burnt hamburgers cooked over the campfire, juice from a carton that tasted like metal. He sat directly across from me on the log and didn't take his eyes off my plate, commenting casually, "Eat up, Daniel. You need strength for the night." His foot brushed mine under the table, an accident that lasted too long, and I moved, pretending to have an itch. During the nighttime campfire, the circle of faces lit by the flames, she managed to sit next to me on the log, her arm brushing mine every time she moved to tell a joke, and the bear said, "I'm not your mom." The boys laughed, but his elbow lingered on my side, the heat of his body too close. I tried to move away, but the circle was tight, and his knee pressed against mine. Pass me the marshmallow, Hawk." I took the stick, my hand shaking, and he grabbed it, his fingers wrapping around mine for a second. Good grip. I cringed, wishing with all my might to become invisible, the fire crackling like mocking laughter. The idea of going to sleep, of crawling into that tent so close to his, the green canvas a foot away, the zipper of his door visible from my window, terrified me like nothing ever had before. As I got ready for bed, the sun setting red behind the pines, I told my patrolmates, in whispers muffled inside the tent, the smell of canvas and teenage sweat heavy in the air. "Guys, Mr. Evans. He scares me. He touches me weird. In the boat, on the hike. He said it's a secret." Tommy, brushing his teeth with a bottle of water, laughed. "You're crazy. He helped me with the paddle yesterday. He's great." Joshua, rolling up his jacket. "Yeah, you're exaggerating. He's just friendly. Don't be a baby." Sam, the quiet one, muttered. He looked at me weird once too, but nothing happened. They didn't quite believe me. To them, he was the cool leader who told stories about bears and knots, the one who handed out extra candy. I was the weird kid who was scared of shadows. Loneliness and fear closed in on me like a fist, the secret weighing on my chest like a stone. I went to bed fully clothed, even my muddy sneakers on, resorting to my sleeping bag and zipping it up to my nose, creating an illusory fabric barrier between me and the outside world. I prayed that he would forget about me, that dawn would come quickly, the scout handbook open on my lap like a talisman, the pages on signals for help blurred by the tears I refused to let fall. Sleep was impossible, a limbo of open eyes in the darkness. The sleeping bag a suffocating cocoon that smelled of sweat and fear. Every crackle outside the tent was him approaching, a branch snapping, an animal sniffing, every whisper of the wind against the canvas, his stealthy footsteps. My companion snored. Tommy with a nasal whistle, Joshua muttering in his sleep about pizza, Sam still as a log. I could hear the muffled laughter from the distant camp, the leaders chatting around the extinguished campfire, oblivious to the danger I felt so keenly in my bones. The hours passed agonizingly slowly, the flashlight on my watch marking 11:30 p.m., midnight, 1:15 a.m., the forest whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I tried counting sheep, but their faces turned into his, smiling with white teeth in the darkness. And then I heard it. The most sinister sound that can exist in the stillness of a forest. The slow, meticulous sliding of a tent zipper. A soft zip that cut through the silence like a knife. It wasn't our front door, the thick zipper that Tommy had double-locked. It was the canvas window at the back of our tent, the one that looked directly out onto the dark forest and that we had left ajar for ventilation because of the heat. A soft, deliberate scraping, followed by a slight click, like metal against metal, a buckle, perhaps, rubbing against the fabric. I froze in my sleeping bag, my body stiff as a board, my heart pounding steadily in my chest, drowning out any sound. I couldn't breathe deeply. Each inhalation was a short sip, the air heavy with pine and terror. The boys' snoring continued, oblivious, and the zip repeated, longer this time, the canvas separating inch by inch. A gust of cold air came in, smelling of damp earth and something else, male sweat, pine soap, and a shadow was silhouetted against the slightly less black sky outside, filtering through the opening. It was large, familiar, the broad silhouette of shoulders hunching to pass through. Mr. Evans slid into the tent with the fluidity of a stalking snake, the canvas creaking under his weight. The tent was small, 10 feet by 10, and our sleeping bags were crammed in a row like sardines. Tommy on the left, me in the middle, Joshua on the right, Sam at the back. He knelt right between Mike, Tommy, and me, the canvas floor sinking beneath his knees, his calm, controlled breathing breaking the silence. I could smell his fresh sweat, mixed with the scent of the pine soap he used after lake showers, and something else, more acidic, like contained nerves. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, motionless in the gloom, his eyes adjusting to the darkness, scanning the tent like a predator assessing sleeping prey. He reached out a hand, large and calloused, not toward me directly at first. He ran his open palm over Tommy's sleeping bag, grazing the fabric like invisible radar, his fingers flexing slightly. Tommy murmured in his sleep, turning over, but he didn't wake up. Then the hand moved toward mine, slow, deliberate, fingers finding the opening of the bag near my neck, where the zipper ran down to my waist. Cold air rushed in, and his fingers, cold despite the summer heat, brushed my exposed collarbone, moving an inch down my chest, the contact like burning ice. That broke the spell of my paralysis, terror exploding in my chest like a grenade, with a scream that came from deep within me, a guttural, terrified sound that I didn't even recognize as my own, a howl that tore through my throat like glass. I jumped up inside the bag, kicking my legs to free myself, blindly punching my fists in the darkness. "Get away! Don't touch me! Get out!" I shouted, my voice coming out shrill, the sleeping bag tangling around my arms like a net, panic giving me the strength to push against his solid chest. Chaos erupted instantly. Tommy woke up with a start, shouting, "What's going on? Bears!" and rolled out of his sleeping bag, flashlight in hand. Joshua sat up, babbling, "Fire, fire," and kicking at his tangled sleeping bag. Sam squealed from the back, curling up. The kneeling figure jumped to his feet, the tent shaking with his movement. And in the dim light, I saw Mr. Evans' pale, startled face, his eyes shining with a mixture of panic and contained anger, his mouth open in a silent O. "Daniel, what's going on?" Tommy shouted, clicking on his flashlight with a click that lit up the tent like a flash, the beam sweeping the space and falling directly on Mr. Evans, standing in the middle of us, out of place, with no plausible reason to be there, at 2:17 a.m., the canvas of the window still open behind him like a wound. "I heard a noise," stammered Mr. Evans, his voice sounding false and strained, taking a step back toward the window, his hands raised in feigned innocence. "I thought it might be a raccoon. Getting in through the window, I came to check." But it was too late. My screams had alerted the entire nearby camp. Flashlights came on outside like falling stars. Voices shouting, "What's going on? Hawks!" Hurried footsteps crunching the gravel and grass. Mr. Miller burst through the front door seconds later, his face pale with concern under his scout hat, flashlight in hand. "What the hell is going on here? Why are you screaming like the devil is chasing you?" I was shaking uncontrollably, huddled against the canvas wall, tears running hot down my face, dirty with mud and sweat, the sleeping bag tangled around my legs like chains. I pointed a trembling finger toward the open window, the cold wind rushing in gusts. Mr. Evans. He was here, inside our tent. He tried, "Touch me." My voice broke into a sob, the words coming out in fits and starts, terror still pounding in my chest like a wounded animal. Tommy, still holding the flashlight aloft, looked at Evans. Yes, I saw him. He was kneeling between us. "What were you doing, sir?" Joshua stammered. I woke up and he was there, like a thief. Sam, the quiet one, muttered, "I saw him too. He came out the window." Evans's clumsy explanation about a raccoon crumbled in the face of my obvious terror. Pale face, wide eyes, uncontrollable sobbing, and the testimony of the boys who now, frightened and confused, confirmed every detail. Him, kneeling in the dark, his hand outstretched, the open window as silent proof. Mr. Miller looked at him, the flashlight sweeping over his rumpled uniform. "Evans, explain yourself. What were you doing in the boys' tent at this hour?" Evans stammered, "Just checking. Noise. Raccoon. Didn't mean to scare anyone." But his voice trembled, his eyes darting from face to face, and Mr. Miller said firmly, "This doesn't add up. Stay here. I'll call the other leaders." The search began immediately, a chaos of powerful flashlights sweeping the forest like stadium spotlights. Mr. Miller and the other adults, 4 in total, walkie-talkies crackling, shouting, "Evans, show yourself." while the boys huddled in the clearing, wrapped in blankets, shivering not from the cold but from contagious fear. I stayed in the tent, huddled with Tommy, who was now hugging me. "I'm sorry, Danny. I didn't believe you before. Are you okay?" He sobbed. He touched me. He said, "Secret. Joshua. He's crazy. He won't be back." But the forest was dense, tall pines and thorny bushes swallowing the light, and Evans knew the terrain like the back of his hand. He had camped there before, telling stories of survival alone. They heard branches crackling in the distance, a this way, from Mr. Miller. But when they ran, they found only abandoned boots in a stream, the mud churned up. He got away, Mr. Miller said when he returned, his face grim, radio in hand, calling the state police. Intruder at scout camp, suspected of inappropriate behavior with a minor. The police arrived by helicopter at dawn, the rotor whirring like an angry swarm over the lake. Officers in tactical vests searching the area with barking, sniffing dogs. They questioned everyone. Mr. Miller recounting the scream, Tommy confirming the kneeling figure, me recounting the touches, the paddle, the walk, the thigh. My voice broken but firm. He looked at me strangely from the beginning. He said, "Our secret." An agent, a woman with a ponytail and a hard expression, knelt down to my level. "Good boy for screaming. Anything else?" I sobbed. He wanted, I don't know. But he scared me. They found his empty tent, backpack with clothes, and a missing multi-purpose knife, and the car parked a kilometer away with footprints leading into the woods. But Evans was elusive. He knew hunting trails, river crossings that erased tracks. They found him the next morning, hiding in a cave a few miles away, a rocky hole covered with vines, curled up in his sleeping bag, with a dazed beard and wild eyes. "Just checking," he mumbled to the officers, but the muddy footprints on his clothes matched the tent, and his story fell apart under questioning. "Raccoon at 2 a.m. Through the back window." They handcuffed him, shouting, "I didn't do anything, it's a misunderstanding," and lifted him into the helicopter, the rotor blades kicking up leaves and dust. The camp ended abruptly that morning. The clearing now a chaos of vans and crackling radios, parents arriving in dusty cars with pale faces. My mom ran from the parking lot, hugging me before asking, "Danny, what happened?" Mr. Miller's phone. I sobbed on her shoulder, the smell of her perfume, lavender and vanilla, an anchor in the panic. A leader. He came into my tent. He touched me. Dad arrived later, his face red with contained rage, hugging me tightly. "No one will hurt you, son. Let's go home." The ride back was silent. Mr. Miller's van now empty, the pine-covered landscape blurred by unstoppable tears. Mom tried to comfort me. "It was a misunderstanding, sweetheart. You're safe." But I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat choked everything. I just nodded, looking out the window at the river, winding like a scar. I never went back to Scouts. The weekly meetings became excuses, homework, or flu, and Dad stopped insisting after the first time he saw me break down in tears at the sight of the uniform in the closet. "It's okay, son. There are other ways to be a man." The smell of pine turns my stomach at family barbecues. The sound of a tent zipper in adventure movies makes me jump off the couch, the feeling of a hand on my shoulder. Even Dad's at a baseball game tenses my muscles. I went to child therapy with Mrs. Lopez, a gentle woman with round glasses who drew feelings as colors with me. Fear in black, loneliness in gray. "It wasn't your fault, Daniel," she would repeat, but I would stammer. I screamed, but what if I hadn't? What if? The dreams came. Him kneeling, his hand coming down, the scream stuck in my throat. Mom would wake me up. "Shh, it's just a dream." But it wasn't a dream. It was the echo of what almost was. As an adult, the impacts seeped into everything. At 16, I turned down an invitation to a school camp. I don't like the woods. In college, I avoided groups of older guys, distrusting mentors who helped too much. My first girlfriend, at 20, noticed my stiffness in bed. "Relax, Danny, I won't bite." But the touch froze me. Flashbacks of that hand on my thigh. Adult therapy with Dr. Hale. It's unresolved trauma. Interrupted abuse leaves what-ifs. I talked. I cried. I processed. I screamed. I survived. Now, at 36, married to a woman who understands my silences. Father to a 10-year-old who loves the Scouts. Dad join as a leader. I say no. There are other clubs. But I teach him knots in the backyard, watching every shadow. Mr. Evans was never fully caught. The police found his car abandoned on a forest road with a bus ticket to Seattle on the seat. We later learned that there was a warrant for his arrest in Washington on similar charges. A 14-year-old boy at summer camp. Accidental. Touching that escalated to intrusion. He fled to Canada, changed names, but in 2005 he was caught in Vancouver for possession of illegal material. Photos of boys in locker rooms. Sentenced to 15 years, he died in prison of cancer in 2012. I read it in an online article. His face in the yellowed photo. Easy smile. Hungry eyes. I closed the tab. Relief mixed with anger. Too late. Years have passed, but that scared 12-year-old boy still lives inside me. A silent passenger who jumps at zippers or hands on his shoulder. The fear I felt in that tent was not supernatural. There were no ghost or folklore monsters with claws and howls. The monster was real, wearing a scout uniform with shiny badges and using a friendly smile as bait to get close, a friendly hand that rested on your shoulder, and a whisper in the dark telling you to keep a secret that is tearing you apart inside. And the scariest thing of all is that if I hadn't screamed at that precise moment, if fear had paralyzed me for 1 second longer, my story could have had a very, very different ending. Not an echo, but a void. A silence that cannot be filled with therapy or time. I survived, but the forest took a part of me. And on windy nights, I hear the zipper sliding again. This is not a story about ghosts, or a masked killer lurking in the woods with a rusty machete. It's more subtle than that. More gray and sticky, like a fog that seeps into your lungs without you noticing until it suffocates you. It's one of those experiences that doesn't give you immediate nightmares with screams and elongated shadows, but rather settles in a corner of your mind and occasionally gives you a little twinge, a reminder that the world has forgotten corners and silent pains that sometimes, by cruel chance, cross your path and mark you forever. This happened to me just a month ago, during a weekend camping trip with my family, and since then the image of that child and that cave has not left me. It creeps into my peaceful dreams, into innocent conversations with Chloe about forest animals, into nights when David snores beside me and I lie staring at the ceiling, wondering if I did the right thing or if, somehow, I made everything worse. My name is Amy, and together with my husband David and our 7-year-old daughter Chloe, we decided to take advantage of a long weekend in October to escape the constant hustle and bustle of Seattle, where traffic on I-5 is a river of metal that drags you along and bills pile up on the kitchen table like an unstable tower. Chloe, with her boundless energy that seems fueled by eternal batteries, was thrilled at the idea of sleeping in a tent, making campfires with sticky marshmallows, and looking for squirrels, which, according to her, surely talk in secret. For David and me, it was a necessary break, a chance to reconnect away from the screens that devoured us, him with his emails from the architecture firm, me with my freelance graphic design online classes, and the endless to-do list that reminded us that adult life is more about chores than adventures. "Let's pretend we're explorers," I said to Chloe in the car, as she jumped around in the back seat singing a made-up song about dancing bears. David laughed from behind the wheel, his hand brushing mine on the gear shift. "Yeah, but I'm the one with the map. You just yell if you see a raccoon." The drive from Seattle to Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest took about 3 hours, winding along back roads, flanked by pine trees that closed in like a green tunnel. Chloe was armed with her pink adventure backpack, filled with crayons. a notebook for drawing magical animals, and a toy flashlight that flashed colors. David and I chatted about silly things. His latest project, a sustainable building that would change the skyline, my ideas for a new course on digital illustration. But underneath there was an undercurrent of shared exhaustion. Him with deadlines that kept him up until 2 a.m. Me with sleepless nights worrying about whether Chloe was eating enough at school. "This will recharge us," he said, squeezing my hand. I nodded, watching out the window as the cityscape gave way to wooded hills, the sun filtering through in golden rays that promised oblivion. We reserved a spot at an organized campground near North Bend, one of those places with chemical toilets and numbered picnic tables. But our adventurous spirit, or what remains of it after mortgages and electric bills, led us to explore the less traveled trails that wound into the hills behind the campground. We arrived on Friday afternoon, the sun already low, and pitched our tent in a clearing overlooking the lake, a 3-person dome that David inflated with the hand pump, cursing when it got stuck. Chloe ran around in circles shouting, "Bear house," while I hammered stakes into the soft ground, the hammer echoing like a distant drum. David lit a small fire with dry branches we had gathered, the smoke rising in gray spirals, and we roasted hot dogs on sharpened sticks, Chloe burning hers and laughing when it fell into the dust. "Look, Mom, a flying hot dog." We ate dinner sitting on logs, counting stars that were beginning to prickle the purple sky. And for a moment, everything was perfect. David kissing my temple, Chloe curled up in my lap with a campfire story we made up about guardian squirrels. But the perfection lasted only until nightfall. Chloe fell asleep quickly in her pink sleeping bag, snoring softly like a kitten. But I lay awake, the hard ground beneath the tarp poking my hip, the wind whispering in the pines like distant conversations. David purred beside me, his heavy arm around my waist, and the lake lapped against the shore 100 yards away, a hypnotic rhythm that should have calmed me. Instead, it stirred me, the cold air seeping in through the poorly zipped tent. "Sleep, love," David murmured without opening his eyes. "Tomorrow we explore." I nodded in the darkness, but sleep didn't come. Instead, thoughts about work, a client who was late with payments, a design that didn't quite fit, and a slight tingle of unease, as if the forest was watching us. Finally, I fell asleep, dreaming of Chloe, lost among trees that moved on their own. On Saturday morning, the sun woke us with a chorus of invisible birds, Chloe springing out of her sleeping bag. "Adventure. Let's go to the lake." We ate crunchy granola bars and juice from a carton that tasted like plastic. David making coffee in a pot over the campfire while I tied Chloe's shoelaces, her new sneakers already stained with mud from the day before. "Long trail today," he said, unfolding the crumpled map on the picnic table. 3 miles easy, with a stream to skip stones. Chloe clapped her hands. "Magic stones, the one that jumps the highest Grant's wishes." We packed light backpacks, water in reusable bottles, turkey sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap, cereal bars for Chloe, bug spray, and a basic first aid kit with Band-Aids and antihistamines. "Don't wander off, Chloe," I warned her as we started down the trail, a compact dirt path that climbed gently among tall pines, roots exposed like hidden traps. She ran ahead, picking up pine cones that looked like dragon eggs, shouting, "Look at this one, Dad. It's huge." David and I walked hand in hand at first, the sun filtering through rays that warmed our faces, chatting about silly plans. "If we win the lottery, beach house or mountain house," he joked. "Mountain, so Chloe can have her secret cave." I laughed, but the trail grew steeper, the air cooler with the smell of damp earth and fallen leaves, and the chatter turned to gasps for breath. Chloe always ran ahead, her pink backpack bouncing, but she called out every 2 minutes, "Here, Mommy, a rare flower." Once, she disappeared behind a bush for 10 eternal seconds, and I shouted her name, panic rising like bile. "Chloe!" She came out laughing with a leaf in her hand, "It was a butterfly. Don't be scared." David squeezed my hand. "It's okay. It's just a game for her." But the forest was closing in, the pines whispering in the wind, and a slight knot of anxiety settled in my stomach. What if she gets lost? If an animal? After about 2 hours of walking uphill, the trail narrowed beside a babbling brook that cascaded in small waterfalls, the water splashing our sneakers. Chloe jumped from rock to rock, shouting, "Magic Bridge," as David and I followed her, the crumpled map in his pocket. "Look at that big rock," she said suddenly, stopping short at the edge of the stream, pointing to a mound covered in green moss and vines that climbed like veins. "It's a leprechaun house. Look at the door." Her voice was pure excitement, but something about the mound stopped me. It wasn't a natural rock. It was irregularly shaped, like a half-buried arch, and a piece of faded blue fabric protruded from among the vines, fluttering slightly in the breeze, like a rudimentary curtain made from an old rag. "Chloe, wait," I said, grabbing her shoulder as she tried to approach, her sneakers already at the water's edge. A strange feeling, a premonition I couldn't name, ran down my spine like a cold finger. Not pure fear, but a deep and slightly unsettling curiosity, as if the air had suddenly thickened. David, with his architect's eye trained to see hidden structures in chaos, approached slowly, pushing aside a low branch. "It's not natural. Look at the shape." He crouched down, pushing the vines aside carefully, the moss crunching under his fingers. The fabric curtain was actually the sleeve of a worn flannel shirt, faded blue with patches of dried mud, and behind it, the hollow was revealed. A cave, or rather a hole in the living rock, large enough for an adult to crouch inside, about 2 meters high at the entrance, widening to 3 meters deep and 2 meters wide. The floor covered with dry leaves and pebbles rounded by water. David turned on the flashlight on his phone, the white beam cutting through the darkness like a knife, and swept the interior with slow movements. The light illuminated a scene that left the three of us speechless, with a mixture of immediate fascination and a growing unease that tangled in my chest like roots. Against the damp, uneven rock wall dotted with moss, someone had improvised a bed with a pile of old dirty blankets stacked in messy layers that smelled of mold and earth, covered with a faded down jacket with a broken zipper stuffed with dry leaves for cushioning. Next to it was a small pile of canned food, Chef Boyardee ravioli with peeled labels, Bush's beans rusted around the edges, Campbell's soup with dents, all opened with a rudimentary pocket can opener, the edges jagged and sharp as teeth, dried residue stuck to the inside. There were a pair of worn-out sneakers, children's size, perhaps 32, too small for an adult, with frayed laces and soles worn down by miles of mud, and toys, scattered like relics from a lost world, a red plastic fire truck, its paint peeling, with a missing wheel that made it wobble, a teddy bear with a button eye missing, sitting solemnly on an empty peach can, its fur matted with moisture, a blue-covered school notebook, its pages wrinkled and stained with moisture, open to a page with crude drawings made with a chewed pencil, a crooked sun, a square house with a smoking chimney, the figure of a tall man next to that of a small child, both with straight-lined smiles. It was a child's refuge. That much was clear from the small shoes, the well-worn toys, the notebook with childish scribbles. But not a temporary refuge for an adventurous child playing explorers. This had a sense of desperate permanence, of someone who had chosen this cold hollow as a home because they had no other. The cans stacked with a certain order, the soup cans on one side, the bean cans on another, the carefully made but threadbare bed, the toys placed like guardians. Everything screamed survival, not play. "Who lives here, Mom?" Chloe asked, her voice a whisper in the stillness of the forest, her eyes wide and fixed on the entrance, her hand squeezing mine until it hurt. Her excitement had evaporated, replaced by a silence that made her seem older, as if she sensed the weight of what we were seeing. "I don't know, sweetie," I replied, my throat dry, feeling a cold knot in my stomach rising like bile. I looked at David and saw the same concern reflected in his eyes. His jaw clenched, the flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. It could be a hiker or an animal. But my voice sounded false, even to me. The shoes were human, small, and the teddy bear had a hand-sewn patch, like something a mother would do. David turned off the flashlight, the beam disappearing with a click that echoed too loudly, leaving the entrance in darkness. "Let's not touch anything. It could be evidence." His voice was low, professional, the architect in him assessing the structure, the cave like a failed, unstable blueprint. "Let's call the park rangers, this isn't normal." He took his phone out of his jacket pocket but frowned. "No signal. We're too far in." Chloe tugged at my hand. "Mommy, is the boy alone, like in the Hansel story?" Her innocent question broke something inside me, and I hugged her tight. "It's not a story, sweetie. We're going to help." We quickly searched the area, our cautious footsteps crunching dry leaves, the stream murmuring beside us like an indifferent confidant. David circled the mound, pushing aside low bushes. "There's no recent trail. No one has been here in days." I called out softly, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice bounced off the rocks, but only the wind answered, rustling the vines like accusing fingers. Chloe clung to my legs. "I'm scared, Mom. What if there's a wolf?" David lifted her into his arms. "There are no wolves here, just us." But his embrace was tense, his eyes scanning the dense forest, the pines closing in like silent witnesses. We found nothing else. No recent campfire, no adult backpack, no fresh footprints in the mud of the stream. Only the silence of the forest, which now seemed to conspire, the sun setting and lengthening shadows that stretched like fingers toward the cave. "Maybe it's a lost child," David suggested, putting Chloe down and shaking the crumpled map. "There are reports of lost hikers in this area." But his tone was hesitant, his eyes fixed on the cans, dented but not completely empty, as if the occupant was rationing. "The cans are from the supermarket, not from a tourist. This seems permanent." Chloe tugged at his pants. "Daddy, does the child eat alone? Doesn't he have a mommy?" David crouched down to her level. "We don't know, Princess. That's why we called the park rangers." But the knot in my stomach was growing. The cave was not a playful hideaway. It was a nest of despair, and the idea of a child alone there, night after night, with the cold coming down from the mountains, made me clench my fists. We decided not to touch anything, a silent agreement as we backed away from the mound, mud sucking at our boots. Instead, we retreated to a safe distance, about 30 meters uphill, hidden among the thicket of trees where the stream curved, a natural bend that concealed us but gave us a clear view of the entrance. "Let's wait a while," I suggested, my voice low, David's phone in my hand checking for signal every minute, a blinking bar that flashed mockingly. "See if anyone shows up. A parent. A park ranger." David nodded, sitting on a flat rock with Chloe on his lap. "Makes sense. We can't leave without knowing." She curled up, sucking her thumb, a habit I had forgotten. "The elf is sad." I kissed her on the head. "It's not an elf, sweetie. It's a person, and we're going to help." The wait turned into a strange vigil, not for a movie monster with claws and growls, but for a sad, human mystery that tangled itself in our minds like roots. The hours passed slowly, the sun moving across the sky from a warm gold to a silvery gray that heralded the afternoon. We ate our turkey sandwiches in silence, the bread now dry, the filling cold, passing around the bottle of water that tasted like hot plastic. Chloe nibbled on her cereal bar, asking every 10 minutes, "Is Daddy coming yet?" David distracted her with games. "Count the pine cones you see." But his knee bounced, the architect in him weighing risks. "If he's not here in an hour, we'll go back to the campsite and call from there." I checked my phone obsessively, the signal rising to 2 bars, falling to 0, my heart beating anxiously. The forest conspired. A crackling branch made us turn around. A deer passing in the distance, indifferent, a bird chirping loudly like a muffled scream. "Mommy." "What if the baby is hungry?" whispered Chloe, offering her half-eaten snack bar. I hugged her. "We'll find out soon." Time stretched out, the stream murmuring steadily like a broken clock, the sun sinking and lengthening shadows that stretched from the pines toward the cave like curious fingers. David walked a little, checking the map. "We're a kilometer from the main trail. If not, we'll go back." But we stayed, an unspoken decision, the mystery pulling us like an invisible thread. Chloe fell asleep in my lap after an hour, her heavy head against my chest, the sleep of children who forget the world. David and I spoke in whispers. This isn't normal. What if it's a custody case, or worse? He shook his head. Don't speculate. Let's just wait. But the speculation grew. Where was the adult? Why was the child alone? The knot in my stomach tightened with every minute, the forest closing in, the wind whispering secrets in the leaves. And then we saw him. It was around 4 in the afternoon, the sun already low, casting an orange light that stained the clearing with blood. A furtive movement among the trees on the other side of the stream, about 20 meters away, where the undergrowth thickened into a green wall. A small figure, hunched over like a wounded animal, emerged from the thicket, stepping cautiously on dry leaves that crunched like bones. It was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, skinny as a stick, with pale skin dirty with dirt and leaves stuck to it. He was wearing jeans that were too big, rolled up several times at the ankles so he wouldn't trip, held up by a makeshift rope instead of a belt, and a gray hoodie with a blurred logo of some sports team, perhaps the Mariners, faded from washing or time. The hood was up, hiding most of his face in deep shadow, only a pointed chin and chapped lips visible. He walked with the caution of a wild animal in enemy territory, constantly looking back over his shoulder, his eyes, when the hood blinked, scanning the forest as if he expected a predator in every shadow. In one hand, he clutched a red plastic fire truck, the toy hanging loosely, but clung to like a talisman. Our breath caught in unison, a collective gasp that broke the silence of the stream. Chloe woke with a start in my lap, rubbing her eyes. "What's that?" David gently covered her mouth with his hand. "Shh, look." I squeezed his shoulder, my heart rising in my throat, a dull thump drowning out the water. The boy didn't see us. He crossed the stream, jumping from rock to rock with surprising agility for his size, water splashing on his worn jeans, and stopped in front of the cave entrance, scanning the area with an intensity that was not typical for his age, his head turning left and right, his ears alert like a deer's. Then, with a quick fluid motion, he pulled aside the blue fabric curtain with his forearm, his shirt sleeve rustling, and slipped inside, disappearing into the darkness as if the cave had swallowed him. The wait became even more tense, a heavy silence where every falling leaf was a possible footstep, every drop from the stream a heartbeat. Chloe whispered, "It's the elf. He's alone." David reassured her, "It's not an elf, princess. It's a boy, like you." But his voice was low, tense, his hand on my knee squeezing. "Amy, this is bad. What if he's been kidnapped? Or abused?" I nodded, the knot in my stomach now a fist. "We have to get closer, but carefully." We heard faint noises coming from the cave, the metallic sound of a can being moved, a scratching sound as if something were being dragged, a low, monotonous whisper, as if he were talking to himself or singing a broken song. He didn't light a fire, the smoke would have been visible. He didn't go out for wood or water, just the murmur, an irregular rhythm that made my skin crawl. After what seemed like an eternity, 40 minutes that the clock confirmed as only 20, we decided we couldn't just keep watching from the trees, the sun going down and the temperature dropping fast, the forest cooling like a body exhaling. "We have to do something," I said quietly. David's phone showing a flickering signal bar. "We'll call from here if anyone comes out." David nodded, his face serious under the shade of the pines. "I'll go first. You stay with Chloe behind me." She protested. "I want to help." I hugged her. "Shh, stay with me. We're the rescue team." David stood up, brushing the leaves off his jeans. "Hello, is anyone there? We're hikers. We don't want any trouble, just... Are you okay?" There was no immediate response, only a sudden and absolute silence from the cave, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. David repeated, his voice calm but firm, taking a step forward. "We heard noises. We saw the place. If you need help, we're here." Chloe tugged at my hand. "Dad, what if it bites?" He smiled weakly. "It won't bite. It's just scared." But the silence stretched out, taut as a wire. And my pulse pounded in my ears as I imagined the worst. The injured child inside, or worse, not a child but something pretending to be one. David moved closer, carefully pulling back the fabric curtain, the faded blue rustling, and turned on the flashlight. "Just light. I'm not going in." The beam swept across the interior, illuminating the pile of rumpled blankets, the cans glinting like eyes, the teddy bear fallen on its side. And there, curled up in a corner against the damp rock wall, was the child. He was curled up, his knees pressed against his skinny chest, the hood still covering his head like a shell. When the light reached him, he slowly looked up, his huge dark eyes filled with a pure fear that broke my heart. His pupils dilated like wells, the whites of his eyes red from dust or crying. He was dirty. His face and hands covered in dry dirt that cracked in the crevices, his black hair matted under the hood. He looked thin, emaciated, his cheeks sunken and his arms like twigs under his baggy sweatshirt. "Hey, relax, we're not going to hurt you," David said, kneeling at the entrance to look less threatening, the flashlight low in his hand so as not to blind him. "We're friends. What's your name?" The boy said nothing. He just looked at us, visibly shaking, his teeth chattering in the cold rising from the ground. Chloe slipped out of my grip, her small hand slipping out of mine, and took a small step forward, holding her favorite cereal bar, the chocolate one she had saved for dessert. "I get hungry sometimes, too." Her voice was an innocent whisper, the brutal simplicity of children who see the world without filters. Extending the bar wrapped in crispy paper into the darkness of the cave, the boy slowly looked up from the ground, his eyes first fixing on the bar, then on Chloe's sincere face, his hood falling slightly to reveal a pale forehead with a yellowish bruise. With a trembling hand, extended like a claw, he took it, his dirty fingers brushing Chloe's for a second that froze me. Not because of danger, but because of the fragility of that touch, as if it were the first human connection in days. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice hoarse and broken from disuse, unwrapping the bar with teeth that bit into the paper with contained hunger. That small act of connection seemed to break something in him, an invisible dam. He didn't start talking all at once. He didn't tell his story like in a fairy tale. He just stopped shaking so much, sitting up a little straighter on the blankets, the half-eaten bar in his lap. David took advantage of the moment. "Good boy. What's your name?" "I'm David. This is Amy. And the little girl is Chloe." The boy looked at Chloe, who smiled shyly. "I'm Chloe. Do you want my toy truck? It's red." He shook his head, biting off another piece. "No. Thank you. My name is Eli." His voice was a whisper, his eyes downcast, but he had said his name, an anchor in the chaos. "Where are your parents, Eli?" I asked, kneeling beside David, my voice soft so as not to scare him, my heart pounding against my ribs. He shrank back, the bar trembling in his hand. "Dad left. He said he'd be back soon, with food, days ago." His voice broke on days, his eyes filling with tears that didn't fall, the bruise on his forehead looking darker in the flashlight's glow. Chloe took a step closer, sitting down in the mud. "My dad always comes back. He brings ice cream." Eli looked at her, a hint of envy in his expression. "Mine brings beans." But he didn't come. David and I exchanged a glance, the knot in my stomach now a tight bow, neglect, abandonment, a child alone in a cave waiting for a ghost. "How many days, Eli?" David asked, his voice calm, as if he were talking about the weather. The boy counted on his dirty fingers. 5, 6. He lost count. He pointed to the notebook on the ground. "Drawing to remember." David picked it up carefully, the crumpled pages opening. Scribbles of a sun, a house with smoke, a tall man with a hat, Dad perhaps, and a little boy with a backpack. "Nice drawing. Your dad loves you very much." Eli shook his head. "He said he'd come back, but the forest eats people." Chloe offered her hand. "Come with us. We have chocolate." He hesitated, looking at the entrance as if waiting for a sign, but took her hand, the plastic truck in the other. There was no cell service in that remote area. David's phone displayed searching endlessly, so the return to the campsite was a tense march. Eli walking between David and Chloe, his small hand clinging to hers, his steps short and cautious. "Don't run," I said to Chloe, who was pulling to go faster. "Eli's tired." He was limping a little, his left shoe loose, and muttering, "The forest has eyes." David carried his backpack. "Rest, kid. We'll be there soon." But the trail seemed longer, the sun going down and the shadows lengthening. Every crack of a branch a possible dad coming back, or something worse. Chloe chatted to distract him. "My teddy bear's name is Fluffy. What's yours?" "I don't have one," he said, his voice low. "Dad said real bears eat stuffed animals." She laughed. "Mine is Brave." I walked behind, keeping watch, the forest closing in, a knot of guilt and fear. What if the father came back and saw us? Or what if Eli was part of an open case we didn't know about? We arrived at the campground at sunset, smoke from campfires rising in spirals, parents shouting the names of children who were running. The ranger station was a wooden cabin with a radio and maps pinned to the wall. The ranger, a burly man named Hank with a mustache and a worn hat, responding to our knock on the door with a "come in." We explained quickly, David first. We found a cave. A boy alone. He says his dad left days ago. Hank paled, calling on the radio. "Base, we have a possible abandoned miner. Send social services." Eli curled up in a chair, Chloe giving him her truck. "Play. It's a fire truck." He spun it in his hands, wheels squeaking. "Thank you." The social services agent arrived in an hour, a woman in her 30s, with a ponytail and a folder. "Hi, Eli. I'm Laura. Do you want to tell me about your dad?" He stammered. "He went to get food. He'll be back." She wrote it down gently. "We'll look for him. In the meantime, you're coming with me to a safe place." Chloe hugged Eli. "Come back soon." He nodded, his eyes moist. "Yes." We left the campsite the next day, a gray Sunday that matched our mood, packing up the tent in silence while Chloe asked, "Does Eli have a home now?" David carried her to the car. "The helpers are taking care of him." The trip back was quiet. Chloe sleeping in her seat, David and I holding hands. We did the right thing. But at home, the image remained. The huddled child, the teddy bear without an eye. I called social services a week later. Eli is in temporary foster care. Real name, Elias. Father sought. No matching reports. Chloe now draws caves with happy children, but I see shadows. That image, of a little boy waiting in a cold cave for a father who never returned, haunts me at night when Chloe is asleep and the wind whispers. It's not a movie scare. It's the horror of everyday neglect, of abandonment that silently eats away at lives. I hope Eli has found his home, or at least a warm campfire where he doesn't feel lost in the dark. Sometimes. The fear is not of what lurks, it's of the loneliness that is already there, in a forgotten cave, waiting to be found. There is a kind of fear that doesn't hit you suddenly, like a scare in a movie with loud music and shadows jumping off the screen. It's a fear that seeps in, slow and insidious, like fog rising from the river at dusk and enveloping you before you notice that you can no longer see the road. It settles into your bones, into the spaces between your thoughts. And when it finally reveals itself, in all its horrific reality, you realize it had been there all along, growing, feeding on every strange look and every ominous word you tried to ignore. This fear has a name for me, Jeremiah. And it's not just a name. It's the echo of a harsh voice whispering in my dreams, asking about death as if it were a private joke between us. We went camping, my 3 best friends and I. It was an annual tradition we started in college, an escape from our office jobs in Portland, Oregon, where I-5 traffic traps you like a spider web and endless meetings suck your soul out drop by drop. That year, we had chosen a remote spot deep in the Willamette National Forest, Lake Serenity. The name sounded promising, taken from a tourist brochure Leo found at a gas station, an oasis of peace in the Cascades, and we chose it because it promised total disconnection. No cell phone signal, no noisy neighbors, just us, a campfire, and the lake for fishing. There was Mark, the joker of the group who always brought bad jokes, and an out-of-tune guitar. Leo, the meticulous organizer who printed maps and checklists for everything. Joshua, the impetuous adventurer who insisted on living on the edge with his hunting knife and stories of crazy climbs. And me, Joel, the one who is usually the most skeptical. The one who laughs at ghost stories around the fire and says, "Come on, guys, it's just the wind." The idea was born at a taco dinner at my apartment the month before, with local beers and the smell of cilantro filling the air. Mark raised his bottle. "We need to reset. Work has me up to here." Leo pulled out his tablet. Willamette, 3 hours from Portland. Lake Serenity, campsites, fishing allowed. Joshua slammed the table. "Yes, I'll bring the gear. Joel, you bring the common sense." I laughed. "As long as you don't make me tell Bigfoot stories." We packed that week. Me with my 2-person tent and old sleeping bag. Mark with his guitar and marshmallows. Leo with a cooler full of soda and sandwiches. Joshua with a knife and an axe that he swore was for firewood, not zombies. Mom called me before I left. "Take bug spray, Joel, and tell me everything when you get back." "Yes, Mom, it'll be epic." The trip was the same as always. We left on a Friday afternoon, Leo's van loaded to the roof with equipment that squeaked at every turn. Portland traffic, a slow river of taillights. Mark was DJing, playing a classic rock playlist. Springsteen screaming about cars and highways. And Joshua was telling stories from a college camp where a cougar almost ate us. "Liar," I said from the back seat, but I laughed. The stress of work, a coding deadline that kept me up until 3 a.m., fading with every mile. Leo drove, checking the GPS. 2 more hours, we'll be there before dark. We stopped at a gas station for sodas and chips, Mark buying extra gum. For Joshua's breath. "It smells like stale beer." Joshua pushed him. "Better than your cheap cologne." We arrived at sunset, the sun setting red over the hills, the air already cool with the smell of pine and distant smoke. Lake Serenity was beautiful at first glance, a mirror of dark, still water surrounded by rugged mountains that rose like silent guardians, the dense forest of fir and cedar trees closing in on the opposite shore. We parked in the reserved spot, a clearing with a splintered picnic table and a ring of stones for a campfire, and unloaded quickly before it got completely dark. "I'll set up the tent," said Leo, unfolding the large 6-person tent we shared. Mark and Joshua gathered firewood, laughing when a branch snapped in Joshua's hand. "Axe murderer fail." I filled the fridge with ice from the camping cooler, the lake lapping gently 10 meters away, an occasional fish breaking the surface. We lit the fire with dry branches that Joshua had piled up, the fire crackling to life with orange sparks, and we roasted sausages on sharpened sticks, the smoke rising in spirals that smelled like eternal summer. Mark took out his guitar, strumming a clumsy version of Wonderwall, and Joshua opened beers. To Serenity. We drank, chatting about everything. Leo's promotion at his accounting firm, Mark's latest failed hookup. She ghosted me after 3 dates. Joshua's plans to climb Rainier next summer. I told him about the bug in my code that almost cost me a client. But I fixed it. I'm invincible. We laughed until the fire died down to embers, the lake reflecting stars that were beginning to prickle the black sky. The only sign of civilization was a small log cabin on the opposite shore, about 500 meters across the water, with a thin column of smoke rising from its stone chimney like an accusing finger. "Neighbors," Leo commented, adjusting the binoculars he always carried. "It doesn't look like it's inhabited all year round." Joshua shrugged. "As long as they don't come and steal our beer, it's fine." Mark joked. "Or join the campfire. Imagine. Hey guys, I brought marshmallows and an axe." We laughed, but I looked at the cabin for a second longer, the smoke curling in the breeze, a dark spot in paradise. "Sleep well," Leo said, smothering the fire with dirt, and we crawled into the tent, the zipper closing with a final zip that sounded too loud in the silence. The first night was restless. I woke up twice with Chloe. No, wait. This is about Jeremiah, not my family. No, in this story I'm Joel with my friends. I slept little, the hard ground poking through my sleeping bag, the lake lapping like a slow clock. Mark snored like a tractor. Leo muttered about numbers in his sleep. Joshua moved restlessly. At dawn, the sun filtering pink through the canvas, we went out to make coffee in the pot over revived embers, the smoke rising lazily. Day 2. Fishing, Joshua announced, pulling out fiberglass rods we rented from the supply store. Leo checked the map. Stream 1 kilometer away, trout. We packed light, rods, hooks, a cooler with live bait, and walked along a narrow path that wound through pine trees, dew dampening our boots. We reached the stream at noon, a trickle of clear water bubbling over smooth rocks, casting our lines with splashes that scared away invisible fish. "Nothing," Mark grumbled after half an hour, reeling in. "This lake is serenity, not fishing." Leo adjusted his line. "Patience. The manual says—" Joshua laughed. "The manual doesn't fish." I cast mine, the cork floating still, enjoying the silence broken only by the water. Then a man emerged from the woods near the cabin, visible in the distance, crossing the stream on a fallen log with shore steps, worn camouflage rustling. He approached slowly, tall and thin, an unkempt gray beard framing an angular face, pale blue eyes that seemed to see too much, as if measuring invisible distances. "Good morning," he said, stopping 10 meters away, his voice rough as scraped pine bark. "Catching anything?" "Not yet," Mark replied with his usual smile, reeling in his line to hide his unease. "I'm Mark. This is Joel, Leo, and Joshua." "Jeremiah," said the man, nodding slowly, his eyes scanning our faces one by one, lingering on me for an extra second, or so it felt. "I live here." He pointed with his chin toward the cabin across the lake, smoke now visible rising from the roof. "I don't see many people around here. It's quiet." His speech was slow, deliberate, as if he measured each word before releasing it. The pauses charged with something more than just silence. He wasn't unfriendly. He even smiled, revealing yellow teeth. But there was an intensity in his gaze that made me a little nervous, a weight that made the stream sound louder. "It's a beautiful place," I said, trying to be friendly, casting my line again to keep my hands busy. "It is," he agreed. But his gaze was lost in the lake, the water reflecting his face like a distorted mirror. Until it isn't. The lake has its moods, like people. One day it's calm, the next it drags you to the bottom. He paused, his eyes returning to us. "Watch out for the whirlpools. They look harmless, but they suck you in before you can scream." It was the first strange comment, hanging in the air like smoke. We attributed it to the eccentricity of a man who lived alone in the woods. "Classic hermit," Joshua muttered later, and Mark joked, "Thanks for the tip. Any local ghost stories?" Jeremiah smiled crookedly. "Too many, but I saved them for the campfire." He stayed a while longer, watching us cast lines, asking questions that weren't normal. "Are you here alone? No women?" Leo replied. "Just us. Guys' time." He nodded. "Better. The forest doesn't like complications." Then, without further ado, he turned and crossed the log again, vanishing into the trees as quietly as he had appeared, his camouflage blending into the green. We returned to camp with a couple of small trout that Joshua caught at the end. Dinner sorted, but the conversation revolved around him, around the campfire that night, the flames crackling loudly as we roasted the trout wrapped in foil, the smoke rising in spirals that smelled of fish and firewood. Mark poked a marshmallow. What a weird guy. The lake has moods. Sounds like a 70s movie. Leo, always the rational one, checked his phone. Weak signal, but enough. I looked it up. There's a Jeremiah in the property records. He's lived there since the 80s. Widowed, no children. Joshua spat out a bone. I didn't like his eyes. He seemed empty, like he was measuring something. I didn't say anything at first, stirring the coals with a stick, the heat licking my face, but finally I blurted out his questions. They weren't about the weather, about us. "Do you believe in the afterlife?" Mark laughed. "Paranoia, Joel. He's a crazy old man. We're leaving tomorrow." But the knot in my stomach didn't go away. The lake reflected the flames like blinking eyes, and the cabin on the other side was a black dot in the darkness. The next day, Sunday, Jeremiah reappeared, this time waiting for us on the hunting trail Joshua had found on the map. A narrow path up the hill, marked with faded orange paint markers. We were exploring, light backpacks with water and granola bars, Joshua leading the way with his machete, jungle mode, when he emerged from a clump of bushes, sitting on a fallen log as if he had calculated our exact arrival time. "This trail leads to a cliff," he told us without preamble, rising with a crack of his knees, his gray beard catching the dappled light. "A spectacular view, but be careful. The edge is treacherous, rocky, no railing. One wrong step and, well, it's a long way down." He paused, his eyes fixed on Joshua, who was closer. "Sometimes I wonder what it feels like. The fall. That last second of lucidity before the impact. Everything stops, doesn't it? As if the world lets go of you." We stood frozen on the trail, Joshua's machete slowly lowering, the air thick with the buzzing of insects. It wasn't casual safety advice. It was something else, something macabre and personal, as if he were rehearsing a confession. Leo stammered, Thanks for the warning. We won't climb that far." Mark forced a laugh. "Yeah, we're not into leaps of faith." But Jeremiah didn't smile. He approached Joshua, stopping a meter away, his shadow covering the machete. "You're the adventurer, right? The one who's not afraid. That's a nice knife." He touched the handle with a finger, the metal gleaming. "An instrument of life and death. It depends on the hand that holds it. Mine, for example." Joshua took a step back, the machete rising instinctively. "Yeah, well, it's useful for firewood." Jeremiah laughed softly, a sound that was not laughter. "I'm sure it is. Very useful." His gaze rested on Joshua's neck for a second, then rose to his eyes and the silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. "Enjoy the trail, but remember, the forest holds secrets, and sometimes secrets fall." He walked away, down the trail, his footsteps crunching dry leaves, leaving a void that paralyzed us. Joshua spat on the ground. "Damn, what was that? Mark. He's trying to scare us, crazy old man." Leo checked the map. "Let's go back. It's not worth it." But I felt the weight of his words, the fall hanging like a threat. We quickened our pace back, the trail seeming longer, every shadow a possible Jeremiah lurking. That night, the atmosphere at camp was tense, the air heavy like before a storm, the smooth lake reflecting the moon like an accusing eye. We didn't light a big fire, just embers to cook spaghetti in a pot, steam rising white, and the conversation revolved around him around the picnic table, forks poking at cold pasta. Mark pushed his plate away. What a weird guy. The forest holds secrets. Sounds like a slasher movie killer. Leo, always the empathetic one, checked his phone. Weak signal, but enough for a quick article. I looked him up again. Jeremiah Hale, 62 years old. Widowed since the 90s, son killed in a hunting accident. Lived alone ever since. Joshua spat out a noodle. I didn't like his eyes. He seemed empty, like he was measuring something in us. And the knife? Do you think he wants it? I didn't say anything at first, the lake lapping softly behind us, the cabin visible on the other side, like a black dot in the darkness. But finally I blurted out his questions. They weren't about the weather or the trail. They were about us. Do you believe in the afterlife? The fall. Lucidity before impact. It's not small talk. It's personal. Mark forced a laugh. Paranoia, Joel. He's a crazy old man who's been alone for too many years. We're leaving tomorrow, and that's that. Leo nodded. Yeah, but let's keep the arrows just in case. No, wait, what arrows? Joshua took them out of his backpack. I haven't opened them yet. I found them on the trail. I thought they were a gift. There were 4 of them, hand-carved with sharp stone tips, primitive but deadly. The wood fresh as if he had made them that morning. This is no longer a joke, Leo said, turning pale in the light of the flashlight, the arrows glinting in his palm. It's a warning. Or worse. Joshua threw them into the fire. Let them burn. The flames devoured them with a crackle, but the black smoke rising seemed to carry its message. We turned everything off early, crawling into our tents with flashlights sweeping the interior, the zippers closing with a final zip that sounded too loud in the silence. No one slept well. Mark snored but woke up muttering. Leo checked his phone every hour. No signal. Joshua moved restlessly, with the knife under his pillow. I lay awake, the lake lapping like a slow clock, every crack in the forest a possible footstep, branches snapping, leaves whispering, fall. At 2 a.m., I heard a distant splash in the water and sat up, my heart racing. Did you hear that? Leo whispered. Fish. Go back to sleep. But fear had taken hold completely. Jeremiah was no longer an eccentric man telling legends. He was a tangible threat, a sinister presence that had turned our paradise into an open-air prison, the lake reflecting the moon like an eye watching us. On Monday, our last day, we decided to spend the morning fishing on the main lake, one last chance at peace before the trip back to Portland, the traffic, and the offices that awaited. The need to get away from the camp, from the cabin visible across the way like an accusing finger, was overwhelming. We packed our rods and bait quickly, setting out at dawn with light backpacks, the dew dampening the grass. Let's stick together, Leo said, the checklist in his pocket now a forgotten talisman. The mood was somber, the sun high but the air cold, and we cast lines mechanically, the cork floating motionless in the dark water. Mark broke the silence after half an hour. Let's get out of here. I've had enough of serenity. We all nodded, relieved, reeling in our lines with trembling hands. Joshua muttered, If he follows us, I'll give him a piece of my mind. But I was checking the woods, the knife in my pocket for the first time. It was Leo who saw him first. As he gathered our gear on the sandy shore, the lake curving to our left. He stopped dead in his tracks, a gasp escaping his lips, the fishing line falling from his hand into the water with a splash. His trembling arm pointed toward a group of tall alders growing on the shore, right on the edge between the forest and the gravel beach, 20 meters away from us. There, hanging from a low, sturdy branch, an alder tree as thick as my thigh, bent by years of wind, was Jeremiah. His body swayed slowly, driven by the gentle breeze coming off the lake, the thick nylon rope brutally digging into the flesh of his neck, leaving a purple mark that expanded with each turn. His face was congested, swollen like a balloon, his eyes open and glassy, fixed on the gray sky, his tongue protruding slightly between cracked lips. He was wearing the same camouflage shirt as the day before, now wrinkled and stained with dirt at the hem, his bare, dirty feet dangling a meter above the ground, his toes curled like claws. The world stopped at that moment, time freezing like the water in the lake in winter. The splash of a distant fish, the crunch of gravel under our boots. Everything disappeared in a white buzzing in my ears. Joshua was the first to react, falling to his knees on the shore, vomiting yellow bile into the water. Fuck. Fuck. Mark staggered, muttering, "No, no, no," over and over, the rods falling from his hands to the ground with a metallic clank. Leo stood frozen, his phone half out of his pocket. "I'm calling. 911. I stood there, the fishing line still in my hand, watching the human pendulum, the slow swing revealing his back, a light backpack hanging crookedly, as if he had planned to take something with him. The high sun illuminated the scene like a cruel spotlight, the alder tree creaking under the weight, the rope stretched taut. Someone, Leo, I think, called 911, the voice distant and broken. "Emergency, suicide, Serenity Lake, send someone." The police would take hours to arrive. The place was remote, helicopter or ATV from the nearest station, and in our initial shock, a morbid and terrible need to understand led us to do the unthinkable, approach Jeremiah's cabin, crossing the lake in the rented boat with heavy oars splashing, the cold water splashing our pale faces. "We can't leave without knowing," Joshua said, his voice hoarse, vomit still on his shirt. Mark nodded. "Yes, why?" "For us." Leo rowed, "Careful. It could be a trap." I was silent, the lump in my throat choking my words, the boat rocking like my stomach. The cabin was made of weathered logs, the wooden door ajar like an inviting mouth, the smoke already extinguished, leaving a smell of cold ash. I pushed the heavy door open with my shoulder, the hinge creaking like a lament. The interior a single dark and messy room that smelled of stale wood smoke, damp earth, and something more acidic, like old sweat. Joel. The flashlight on my phone swept the space. An unmade bed with gray sheets and a wool blanket full of holes. A rustic pine table with splinters and an overturned chair. A cold wood stove with soot in the chimney. And on the opposite wall, pinned with rusty thumbtacks, dozens of photographs on paper faded by time and humidity, yellowed at the edges like pages from a forgotten diary. Some showed other campers, groups of friends laughing by the lake with fishing rods in hand, couples kissing on the shore at sunset, families with children splashing in the water. They were photos taken with a telephoto lens, from a distance, without the subjects knowing, faces blurred by the zoom, but recognizable. A woman in a straw hat, a bearded man throwing a frisbee. Invasive, as if Jeremiah had been an invisible ghost capturing stolen moments. Leo approached one. "This is from years ago. Look at the clothes." Joshua recoiled. He saw us all, like animals. And then we found ours, stuck in the center, fresh, printed on matte paper that still smelled of ink. Photos of us sitting around the campfire on the first night, our faces lit by the flames. Mark with his guitar halfway through a strum, another of Leo and Joshua fishing on the second day in the creek, their backs to the camera, fishing lines floating. One of me, alone, looking out at the lake that morning with a thoughtful expression I didn't even remember having, the wind ruffling my hair, and the most terrifying, photos from that same morning on the shore, fishing, our backs to the camera taken from the trees, the telephoto lens capturing Joshua's knife on his belt, my hand on the fishing line. They were recent, very recent, the sun at the exact angle of 10 a.m., as if he had been there, in the woods, photographing us as we tried to escape him, not knowing he was already dead, hanging from a tree around the corner of the trail. Mark vomited again on the porch of the cabin, the sound muffled by his hand. He saw us. The whole time. Leo checked the dates on the old photos. Years. Campers from 2015, 2018. Joshua touched one of ours. The bullets were for this. We found the revolver in a drawer in the table. A .38 caliber, loaded with 4 shiny bullets, clean fingerprints, and a half-empty box of ammunition next to a disassembled telephoto lens. Jeremiah wasn't a harmless hermit. He was an obsessive observer, collecting lives like trophies, and we were the last ones in his gallery. The police arrived hours later, an ATV roaring down the trail with blue lights flashing, officers in muddy boots searching the body, cut rope, notes in his pocket. The lake is calling me, and the cabin as a crime scene, photos tagged, fingerprints lifted. Suicide, the coroner confirmed over the radio. Time of death, midnight. Self-asphyxiation. They questioned everyone. Mr. Miller, no. In this story, it's us. They asked us about interactions, comments about death, arrows, strange questions. Yes, we said, the lump in our throats. He was evaluating us. There was no clear note, no discernible motive, no family, no debts, just the box of photos as a silent testament. The other campers in the photos were located by phone. A friendly but quiet guy who lived on the lake. He greeted us once. None had experienced the level of harassment and sinister insinuations that we had, the arrows, the secrets of the forest. But they all remembered his gaze. Empty, as if he were sizing you up. We reported everything that had happened, his comments about death in the creek, the fall, lucidity before impact, the arrows in the tree as a warning, the fear that grew with each encounter. The police took notes in their notebooks, but their perplexity was evident in their pauses, their low hmms. Why did that guy kill himself? And why did he have those photos there? Was he planning something for you? Were the bullets for him, or for the group? We'll never know for sure. The coroner found traces of antidepressants in his blood, possible chronic depression, and the chest suggested voyeuristic obsession. But the why us remained a void, an abyss of a mind that slipped into darkness and decided, in its last act, to drag our peace of mind with it by hanging his corpse like a final sign. We left the lake at noon, the boat splashing back with soaked equipment, the police officer escorting us to the car. Go back to Portland. Don't talk to the press. The trip was silent. The traffic on I-5, a slow river that mirrored my mind. Mark sleeping with his head against the window. Leo checking the news on his phone. Suicide in Willamette, no details. Joshua staring into space. Those bullets. For us. I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel until it hurt, the lake in the rearview mirror like a blinking eye. Calls from family that night. Mom. Joel, are you okay? Leo called. Yes, Mom, just a weird guy. But I didn't give any details. The secret of the chest remained between us. A silent pact in the chat group. No more camps. It's been 2 months since then. Lake Serenity no longer exists for me. It's Jeremiah Lake, a name I've erased from my mental maps. I live in Portland with my routine. Work at an app startup. Dinner with Leo on Thursdays. Beers with Mark on Fridays. Rock climbing with Joshua on Saturdays. But now I check trails beforehand. Avoid lonely cabins. I dream about him. Pale eyes among the trees. Whistling arrows. His body spinning slowly. I wake up sweating, my heart racing, and I wonder if the forest holds more secrets, if other groups found his chest. The local press covered suicidal hermit. No photos of us, but the article mentions witness campers. Leo says closed, but it's not. The emptiness of his why is the real horror. The abyss of a mind that collects lives and decides to end with a spectacle, leaving loaded bullets and stolen photos as a legacy. Now I will always believe in the afterlife, not that of souls, but that of echoes. A dead man who still watches us from the lake, whispering easy decisions. And on my urban walks, every shadow on the river is his hanging silhouette. I've been awake for 72 hours, or maybe longer. Time has become elastic, the days bleeding into the nights with no clear lines of separation. I'm writing this because I need someone to know the truth before it's too late. Before they come for me too. My name is Alex Moreno, and until 11 days ago, I was a fully functioning counselor at Camp Pinewood, a summer camp in the mountains of northern Vermont. I'm 23 years old, I just finished my degree in education, and this was going to be my last summer here before I started my real adult life. A perfect farewell summer. I had no idea I would become this. A paranoid shadow of myself, locked in my cabin, checking the windows every 5 minutes, frantically writing before I forget the details, before they make me forget. But let me start at the beginning, when I was still normal, when Camp Pinewood was still the magical place I remembered from previous summers. We all arrived on June 15th, 7 counselors, 2 cooks, the camp director, and his wife. The camp is located around Mirror Lake, a crystal-clear body of water surrounded by dense pine trees that give the place its name. There are 10 cabins for the kids, 2 cabins for counselors, a main house with a dining room and kitchen, and the director's office in a separate cabin near the dock. It's beautiful here, or it was. Now all I see are places where someone could hide a body. The other counselors were a familiar mix. Sarah Chen had worked with me for the last 3 seasons, 22 years old, a senior at Boston University, majoring in psychology, always efficient, always smiling, the kind of person you instinctively trust. Jake Morrison was your typical 24-year-old jock, a kayaking and swimming instructor, all jokes and muscles. The twins, Rachel and Rebecca Walsh, 20, were inseparable and slightly intimidating in their perfect synchronization. Tyler Green, 21, was the quiet bookworm in charge of nature activities. And then there was Maya Johnson. Maya was 22, tall and athletic, with the kind of infectious laugh that made the kids instantly adore her. It was her second season at Pinewood. During the counselor orientation those first 3 days before the kids arrived, she quickly became the life of the group. She organized an impromptu bonfire on the first night, made us play silly icebreaker games, created this instant family atmosphere that made work feel less like work and more like a paid vacation with friends. The last time I saw her was on June 18th at 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked my phone when I heard her cabin door close. We lived in separate cabins, the male counselor's cabin versus the female counselor's cabin, and my window faced hers. I had seen her go in after our evening staff meeting, her flashlight briefly illuminating the interior before going dark. By the morning of June 19th, she was gone. I woke up around 6:30 a.m. as usual. We had to get ready for the kids' arrival. The first bus was scheduled for 10 a.m. I showered, dressed in my green Camp Pinewood t-shirt, and stepped out into the cool June morning. Sarah was already in the dining room helping prepare breakfast for the staff. Jake was checking the kayaking equipment at the dock. The twins were setting up the arts and crafts stations in the main house. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Tyler was the first to ask, "Has anyone seen Maya?" Sarah looked up from the toast she was preparing. "She's probably still sleeping. She went to bed late. I knocked on her door 10 minutes ago. She's not answering. Maybe she's in the bathroom." But 20 minutes passed, then 30, and Maya didn't show up. The director, Mark Peterson, a burly 50-year-old man with a gray beard, went to check her cabin. He returned 5 minutes later with a confused expression. "She's not there. Her bed isn't made, but her things are still there. Suitcases, clothes, everything." "Did you check the bathrooms?" Sarah asked. "I checked everywhere. Maya, if this is a joke, it's not funny. The kids arrive in 2 hours." We organized a quick search. We checked every building, every trail, shouted her name throughout the camp. Nothing. It was as if she had evaporated into the night. "Maybe she went for an early walk and got lost," Jake suggested, though he sounded unconvinced. Maya knew these woods well. Mark called the local police around 9 a.m. 2 officers arrived 40 minutes later, just as the first bus of campers was pulling up the gravel road. They took our statements, conducted their own search, and finally left, with promises to return if she didn't show up by the end of the day. "He probably had a family emergency," said one of the officers. "It happens often. Young people. They leave without saying anything. But that didn't make sense. Why leave all his belongings behind? Why not at least send a text message? The children arrived in noisy waves, and suddenly we were too busy to think much about Maya. 50 children between the ages of 8 and 14, all excited, all needing attention. We assigned cabins, gave a tour of the camp, established rules, and started the first activities. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, and Maya had become a worrying afterthought. That night, during the staff meeting after the kids were in bed, Mark made an announcement. Maya called. She had a family emergency. Her grandmother is sick. She had to leave quickly, took the first bus into town early this morning. She apologizes for not letting us know. Everyone nodded, relieved. Case closed. Except something about it didn't add up. Why not take her suitcase? Why not at least send a text message to someone? And where had she been between 11:47 p.m. when I saw her enter her cabin and 6:30 a.m. when the supposed first bus would have passed? Buses didn't come that early to this remote area, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Mark had simply misunderstood the details. But then I started noticing things. The next day, June 20th, I helped clean Maya's cabin to make room for extra storage. Her suitcase was still there, her clothes still folded in the drawers, her toothbrush in the bathroom, her book on the nightstand with a bookmark halfway through. Shouldn't someone send her things back? I asked Sarah, who was helping. Mark said she'll come pick them up when her grandmother is better. She doesn't want us to mail them. She might miss something. That's weird. People do weird things when they're stressed. Sarah wasn't looking at me, focused on folding a blanket. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that last night in my head. Maya walking into her cabin, the light going out. And then, nothing until morning when she was gone. Around 2 a.m., I got dressed and walked to the counselor's cabin. It was dark, silent except for the crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. I used my flashlight to inspect the ground around Maya's cabin, looking for what? I wasn't sure. Signs of a struggle, footprints, something. I found nothing obvious, but I noticed something strange. The window of her cabin, which I remembered seeing closed, was now slightly open from the inside, as if someone had been inside recently, needing fresh air. I peered through the window. In the darkness, I could make out the shapes of her belongings still in place, but something was different. The suitcase that had been against the wall was now in the middle of the floor, as if someone had been going through it. A rustle behind me made me turn around. Jake was standing about 20 feet away, dressed in a dark sweatshirt. "Alex, what are you doing here?" My heart was beating fast. I couldn't sleep. I was just walking. "What are you doing here?" "Same. This Maya business has me on edge." He approached, hands in his pockets. "You should go back to bed. The kids need us rested." Yeah, you're right." But as I walked back to my cabin, I could feel his eyes on my back. And I realized something. Jake had come from the direction of the woods, not his cabin. What had he been doing out there in the middle of the night? The next few days established an unsettling routine. The days were busy with camp activities, swimming, hiking, crafts, campfires. But the nights were when my mind worked overtime. I began to observe the other counselors more closely. And once you start looking for inconsistencies, you find them everywhere. Sarah, who had been open and talkative, had become withdrawn. Whenever I mentioned Maya, even in passing, she would quickly change the subject. The twins, Rachel and Rebecca, whispered to each other constantly, falling silent when I approached. Tyler avoided eye contact with me entirely, and Jake had become strangely attentive. "How are you, buddy?" he would ask me multiple times a day. "Sleeping well? You look tired. Need to talk about something." It was the request of someone checking on my well-being, or someone monitoring how much I knew. On June 23rd, 4 days after Maya's disappearance, I found her phone. It was hidden behind the first aid kit in Mark's office. I discovered it by accident when I was looking for bandages after a child scraped his knee. The phone was turned off. The screen cracked. I turned it on. It still had battery power. The last message was from her mother, time-stamped 11:52 p.m. on June 18th. "Call me when you can, sweetie. Grandma is asking about you." 5 minutes after I saw her enter her cabin. So Maya had received a message about her grandmother that night. But why was her phone here, in Mark's office, instead of with her? And why hadn't Mark mentioned finding it? I quickly turned off the phone when I heard footsteps approaching. Mark's wife, Linda, came in carrying clean sheets. "Alex, honey, did you find those bandages?" "Yes, I have them. Thank you." I hurried out, my heart racing, Maya's phone tucked away in my pocket. That night, I sat in my cabin checking Maya's phone. There were dozens of unread messages, multiple missed calls from her family. If she had had a family emergency, why hadn't she taken her phone? Unless she hadn't been able to. Unless something had happened to her before she had a chance to respond to her mother's message. My sleep became erratic. 2 hours here, an hour there, filled with dreams, where Maya was calling me from the woods and I couldn't find her. I would wake up sweating, convinced I had heard screams only to realize it was the wind in the pines. The kids started to notice. "Are you okay, Counselor Alex?" a 10-year-old girl asked during a hike. "You look sick." "Just tired, Lily, don't worry." But I wasn't just tired, I was falling apart. On June 25th, during lunch, I overheard the twins talking quietly near the kitchen door. "He shouldn't be asking so many questions," Rachel said. "Mark will take care of that," Rebecca replied. They fell silent immediately when they saw me, their faces transforming into identical smiles. "Hey, Alex, ready for the relay race this afternoon?" Later that day, I confronted Mark in his office. "I found Maya's phone," I said bluntly. "In your first aid kit." His expression didn't change. "Oh yes, I found it after she left. She must have forgotten it in all the rush." "Then why didn't you give it back to her? She must need it, especially with a family emergency." "I tried to contact her. She's not answering my calls." His tone had turned cold. "Isn't that strange? A family emergency so urgent that she leaves without her belongings, but then she doesn't answer when you try to return her phone." "Alex." Mark stood up, his large frame suddenly intimidating in the small space. "I understand you're concerned. We all are. But Maya is an adult. She made her own decisions. I need you to focus on your job here. The children need stable monitors. I just want to know the truth. The truth is that Maya had an emergency and left. That's the whole story. Now, if you can't handle that, maybe you need to take some time off. Go home early. There are other monitors who can cover for you." It was a thinly veiled threat. Shut up or leave. I left his office shaking, not with fear, but with anger, and something else, confirmation. Mark was hiding something. They all were. That night, I waited until the camp was fast asleep. 2 a.m., I grabbed my most powerful flashlight and headed out into the woods. If something had happened to Maya, if she hadn't taken any of the morning buses, then she had to be somewhere near the camp. The woods were vast, but there were areas where she was more likely to be. Trails I knew, places where counselors went to get away from the kids. I walked for hours, shining my light between trees, checking behind large rocks, looking for recently disturbed soil. Nothing. Just endless forest and the occasional animal tracks. I was about to give up when I saw a light ahead. A flashlight, flickering between the trees. I crept closer, turning off my own flashlight. Through the vegetation, I could see figures. 2 of them, talking in low voices. I moved closer, my heart pounding so loudly that I was sure they would hear me. 10 feet closer. 5. It was Jake and Sarah. "It can't go on like this," Sarah was saying. "He's falling apart. Everyone can see it. Mark says he's leaving in a few days anyway. We just need to keep him stable until then." "What if he doesn't leave? What if he keeps asking questions?" Then we handle it like we handled. Jake stopped, turning abruptly. Did you hear that? I froze, barely breathing. Sarah shone her flashlight in my direction, but I had hidden behind a large pine tree. The beam passed inches from my position. Probably just an animal, she finally said. Come on. We have to get back before anyone else wakes up. I watched them walk away, waited 5 more minutes, then ran back to camp via a different route. Handle it like they handled... what? Maya? Had they done something to Maya? Back in my cabin, I sat on my bed, shaking. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. Something had happened, something terrible. And everyone was involved in covering it up. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the next. By June 28th, I had been awake for almost 72 hours straight. The world had taken on a surreal quality, as if I were viewing life through a dirty glass. Sounds were muffled, colors too bright. My body functioned on autopilot during the day's activities, but my mind was elsewhere, running in circles. The kids were definitely noticing now. I could hear them whispering about me. Counselor Alex is acting weird. Mark had taken me aside twice, suggesting mandatory rest, but I refused. I couldn't rest, not until I knew the truth. I had started keeping a notebook, writing down everything I observed. Sarah washes her hands compulsively. Guilt. The twins are always together, witnesses solidifying their story. Tyler avoids me. Why? What does he know? Jake stands guard at night, watching what? Who? One afternoon during free time, I found Tyler alone in the supply shed. I closed the door behind me. I need you to tell me what happened to Maya. He looked terrified. Alex, I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Everyone does. Something happened to her. No one just leaves like that. And you're all acting like you're keeping a secret. You're exhausted. You're not thinking clearly. Then help me think clearly. My voice had risen to a shout. Just tell me the truth. Tyler pushed me back, his normally kind face now hard. The truth is, you need professional help. You're having some kind of breakdown. Let it go, Alex, for your own sake. He walked out of the shed, leaving me alone among the badminton rackets and volleyballs. Wondering if he was right. Was I having a breakdown? Was it all in my head? But then, why was Maya's phone still in Mark's office? Why was no one talking about her? Why was every mention of her name met with uncomfortable looks and quick changes of subject? No, I wasn't crazy. Something was wrong, and I would prove it. That night, I broke into Mark's office. It was stupid, reckless, probably illegal, but I didn't care anymore. I needed answers. I waited until 3 a.m., when I was sure everyone was asleep. I used a paperclip to pick the simple lock, a skill I'd learned from a roommate in college. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, I used my flashlight to illuminate Mark's desk. Camp papers, children's health forms, schedules. Nothing useful. I tried the drawers. Locked. I used the paperclip again. In the bottom drawer, I found a folder labeled Personal Confidential. Inside, incident reports from previous years. Nothing relevant. But then at the bottom, I found something. A handwritten letter, undated, unsigned. We can't go on like this. What happened was an accident, but lying about it makes it worse. Someone will eventually ask the right questions. What do we do then? My hand was shaking as I read. An accident. Maya had died in an accident, and everyone was covering it up. But what kind of accident? And why cover it up? Accidents happen. You could get sued. You could lose your camp license, but it wasn't like... Unless it was the kind of accident that would result in criminal charges. Negligence, or worse. You found what you were looking for. I turned around. Sarah was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Behind her, Jake, the twins, Tyler, all blocking my exit. We knew you'd try this, Sarah said. Mark said you'd come to this eventually. What did you do to Maya? My voice was hoarse. Nothing, Jake said, stepping into the office. Absolutely nothing. Because Maya is fine, Alex. She's with her family. Then why the letter? Why all the cover-up? There is no cover-up, Sarah said softly. There is only an exhausted monitor experiencing a psychotic episode due to lack of sleep and stress. You're projecting, Tyler added. Maya is gone. End of story. But you can't accept it because she's dead. The words came out in a scream. You all know it. You're all hiding it. Was it an accident at the lake? Did she fall during a hike? What happened? Alex. Mark had appeared behind the group, his voice calm but firm. I called your parents. They're coming to pick you up tomorrow. You need help we can't give you here. I'm not crazy. No one said you were, but you need rest, professional care, and this environment is clearly not healthy for you right now. They looked at me with expressions of pity, and in their eyes, I saw my reflection. Disheveled, bloodshot eyes, shaking, holding that letter as proof of a conspiracy that only I could see. What if they were right? What if Maya really was gone, and I had constructed this elaborate fantasy around her departure? Sleep deprivation can do terrible things to the mind. Hallucinations, paranoia, false connections between unrelated events. Let me call her, I finally said. Let me call Maya and hear her voice, then I'll let it go. Mark nodded. Of course. In the morning we'll call Maya together, but now you need to sleep. Sarah is going to stay in your cabin tonight, just to make sure you're okay. I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. I let them guide me back to my cabin, Sarah following me like a gentle but firm shadow. But before we left, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On Mark's desk, partially hidden under some papers, was a jacket. A small green Camp Pinewood jacket with a name embroidered on the chest, Maya. The same jacket she had been wearing the last night I saw her. I didn't sleep that night either, though. I pretended to for Sarah's sake, who sat on the other bed watching me. Around 5 a.m., her breathing became steady. She was finally asleep. I slipped out of bed and climbed out the window, something I had done hundreds of times in previous summers for nighttime adventures. But this time, it wasn't adventure. It was survival. I needed to talk to someone outside this place, someone who wasn't involved in whatever was going on here. I ran to the camp office where there was a landline. Cell phones didn't have reliable reception here in the mountains. I called the state police. I need to report a missing person, Maya Johnson. She disappeared from Camp Pinewood 10 days ago, and everyone is lying about it. The dispatcher was patient but skeptical. He took my information and said they would send someone to check it out. I hung up feeling a mixture of relief and terror. Either I was saving Maya's life, or I was confirming my complete mental breakdown. 2 hours later, 2 state detectives arrived. I watched them from my cabin while Mark talked to them in his office. After 30 minutes, they came out and left. Mark came to my cabin with a look of paternal disappointment. The detectives checked with Maya's family. She's in the hospital with her grandmother in Cleveland. She's been there since June 19th. Her mother confirmed that Maya called her that morning to say she was coming. No, that couldn't be true. But her jacket, she left it here. People leave things. Alex, your family's on their way. They should be here in a few hours. I watched him leave, my world crumbling. Had I been completely wrong? Had I harassed my coworkers, broken into offices, scared everyone based on nothing? But then, looking out my window, I saw something. Jake and Sarah walking toward the woods, carrying shovels. Shovels. Without thinking, I followed them, staying far enough back that I couldn't be seen. I watched them take a familiar path, one that led to a clearing where the monitors sometimes went to smoke cigarettes hidden from the children. I watched them stop at an area where the ground looked recently disturbed. I watched them start digging, and then I saw it. A green fabric edge, Maya's other jacket, and beneath it, a pale hand. I backed away, a sound escaping my throat that was half moan, half scream. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I couldn't. Jake turned, saw me. His eyes widened. I ran. I ran back to camp, tripping over roots, branches scratching my face. Behind me, I heard footsteps following me. More than 2 people, all the counselors chasing me. I reached the camp office, threw open the door, grabbed the phone. But before I could dial, I felt hands grabbing me, pulling me back. "Calm down, Alex," Mark's voice in my ear. "Calm down. You're having an episode. There's no body. Maya is alive. This is all in your head." I saw them. I saw her hand. They were planting trees, Sarah said gently. "For a new memorial garden. It's an end-of-summer project. That's all you saw. Was it?" Had I seen what I thought I saw, or had my exhausted mind finally crossed over into full-blown hallucination territory? I no longer knew what was real. Now I'm home, in the basement of my parents' house, where they've temporarily set me up. They say I had a complete breakdown. Sleep-deprived paranoia, the doctor said. Delusional thinking. They prescribed medication, therapy, rest. My parents believe the camp story that I got stressed, that I invented an impossible scenario about Maya, that I need time to heal, but I still have her phone. I hid it before they came to pick me up. And yesterday, I finally mustered the courage to check it again. There was one more thing I hadn't seen before. A video, recorded at 11:51 p.m. on June 18th. It's dark, shaky. It shows the inside of Maya's cabin. Her voice whispers, "I don't know if anyone will see this, but if anything happens to me, there's something weird about this camp. The other counselors are acting strange. I found files in Mark's office. Another counselor disappeared 3 years ago. No one talks about it. I think I'm going to..." The video cuts off abruptly. The timestamp. 1 minute before her mother sent that text message about her grandmother. So she had been scared of something. She had suspected something, and then either I'm the last sane person who knows the truth, or I'm exactly what everyone says I am, a mentally ill man who has constructed an elaborate fantasy around the routine departure of a coworker. I don't know which is true anymore. The medications cloud my thinking. Therapy tells me to question my perceptions. My parents watch me constantly, worried I might relapse. But I still have the phone, I still have the video, and every night I wonder, should I show it to someone, or is it just more evidence of my disconnect from reality? Maybe sharing this, writing it all down, will help someone see the truth. Or maybe it will just confirm what everyone already believes. That I broke down under stress and lack of sleep. That I saw conspiracies where there were none. That I need help. When the scariest part is that I'm not even sure myself anymore. Is Maya dead? Buried in the woods behind Camp Pinewood? Or is she alive in Cleveland taking care of her grandmother, completely oblivious to the paranoia her departure triggered in a fellow counselor who lost control? Are my fellow counselors murderers covering up a crime? Or are they just concerned camp workers trying to manage a colleague who was clearly losing it? I don't know. And that uncertainty is what keeps me awake at night, writing and rewriting these events, trying to find the version that makes the most sense. All I know for sure is this. I went to Camp Pinewood as a rational, stable person. 11 days later, I left as something else entirely. And somewhere between the first day and the last, I lost the ability to distinguish between what is real and what my exhausted mind created to make sense of something I never fully understood. Does that make me crazy? Or does it make me the only person paying attention? I guess I'll never know for sure, and maybe that's the point. I always believed that Camp Blue Lake was the best summer job a 19-year-old could have. It was a place where the world was reduced to the essentials. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the smoke from the campfire rising in gray spirals, and the laughter of children running around with sticks as if they were legendary swords. The air smelled of fresh pine and absolute freedom. The days were filled with sack races and clumsy crafts with sticks and glue, and the lake reflected an endless sky that made the problems of the city, bills, final exams, crappy jobs, seem like a distant dream. It was my second summer there, and I felt like a veteran among rookies. I knew the winding paths that climbed the hill to the lookout point, the best hiking trails that avoided mosquitoes, and most of the counselors who returned year after year like migratory birds. What I didn't know was that beneath the idyllic surface of the camp, in the very heart of the night when the children slept and the forest whispered secrets, a black tumor was hidden, growing a little more each year, fed by the complicit silence of all of us. And I, without wanting or seeking it, would become its most uncomfortable witness, the one who saw the cracks open and couldn't close his mouth in time. I arrived at camp in late June, the Oregon midday sun heating the asphalt of the back road until the air rippled like hot water. The employment agency bus dropped me off at the main entrance, a wooden archway carved with the name Blue Lake in letters worn by the rain, and I hoisted my backpack onto my shoulder, filled with extra t-shirts, a compact sleeping bag, and the counselor handbook I had reread on the way. The director, Mr. Harlan, a 50-year-old man with a gray beard and hands like shovels, welcomed me with a handshake that cracked my knuckles. "Welcome back, kid. The newbies need you. Your cabin is number 4, next to the lake." I nodded, the sticky heat already seeping through the collar of my t-shirt, and walked down the gravel path that crunched under my sneakers, past wooden cabins with green tile roofs and porches where old counselors hung hammocks. The lake glistened to the right, a blue mirror dotted with red kayaks floating like abandoned toys, and the pine forest closed in on the left, dense and whispering. My cabin was the same as last year. 4 olive green painted metal bunk beds, thin mattresses that smelled of disinfectant and mold, and a window with a broken screen that let in nighttime buzzing. I shared with 3 new counselors. Tim, a 21-year-old from the local university with blonde hair and a southern accent who never stopped talking about his girlfriend. Sarah, 18 and enthusiastic, with braids and a backpack full of camp bracelets. And Ben, the quiet 19-year-old like me, with glasses and a fondness for survival books that he read aloud. "This year's going to be epic," Tim said as he walked in, tossing his bag onto the top bunk. "Last year I heard there's a counselor who does fire tricks." Sarah laughed. "I want the kayaks. Who's in?" Ben muttered, "As long as there are no bears." I smiled, unpacking my sleeping bag. Every year there's a bear that turns out to be a raccoon. Relax. But inside, I felt the familiar excitement mixed with a slight knot of responsibility. Looking after 28 to 12-year-olds for 8 weeks wasn't just fun. It was making sure they didn't drown in the lake or get lost in the woods. Orientation lasted the rest of the day. Meetings in the main dining hall, a log building with long tables and the smell of varnished pine, where Mr. Harlan went over the rules. No alcohol, no physical contact with campers. Report any problems. I met the veterans. Chloe, the arts counselor who painted animal faces on the children and always smelled of watercolors. Mark, the sports instructor who organized races and had an infectious laugh. And Gareth, the head counselor, 22 years old, muscular in a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-toned biceps, with short brown hair and an easy smile that could convince a child to eat vegetables or a parent to donate more. "Frank, right?" "The knot guy," he said as he shook my hand, his grip firm but not crushing. "Last year you saved that tent that blew away in the storm. Good job." I nodded, the memory vague. A windy night, lashing the lake. Me hammering in extra stakes while the kids screamed inside. "Just luck." He laughed. "Luck is for losers. You have instinct." His gaze lingered for a second, appraising, but I chalked it up to veteran camaraderie. The campers arrived the next day in yellow buses kicking up dust on the gravel road, a throng of backpacks and excited faces. My group was the Pioneers, 10 kids aged 9 to 11. Hyperactive Timmy, who never stopped asking why, shy Lisa, who clung to my leg on walks, and Joker Carlos, who hid frogs in other people's bunk beds. The first day was controlled chaos, health checks in the infirmary, thermometers, and band-aids for imaginary scrapes, assignment of bunks in the wooden cabins with triple bunk beds, and an assembly in the natural amphitheater, a semicircle of logs facing the lake where Mr. Harlan welcomed us with a speech about friendship in nature. Gareth stood beside him, arms crossed, smiling as the children cheered. "This summer will be unforgettable," he said, and the pioneers applauded, but I noticed how his gaze swept over the group of counselors, lingering on Chloe for an extra second. She looked away, adjusting her whistle. The routine quickly fell into place: communal breakfasts in the dining hall, scrambled eggs and orange juice that tasted like cardboard, daytime activities like crafts with Chloe, where the kids glued pine cones onto cardboard for forest art, relay races with Mark where I timed and shouted "Faster, pioneers," and afternoons swimming in the lake with lifeguards floating like buoys. The children adapted. Timmy won all the races. Lisa secretly drew rabbits. Carlos did tricks with ropes that I taught him, but the evenings were for the counselors. Brief meetings in the dining room to plan the next day. Cold beers from a shared cooler that we passed around on the porch of the main cabin. Talks about the worst camper or the best campfire. Gareth dominated those nights, telling stories from his first summer. I almost got eaten by a coyote, but I scared it away with a stick. And we all laughed, Chloe a little less, Ben nodding quietly. One night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Gareth came up to me on the porch, beer in hand. "Frank, I hear you're good with knots. I need help with something special this week." I nodded. "Sure, what is it?" He smiled. "The hunt. It's a tradition for counselors. Are you in?" I vaguely remembered stories from the previous year. A nighttime game of hide and seek, and said yes, the adrenaline of novelty overcoming my fatigue. It all started, like so many terrible things, with a game. It was called The Hunt, and it was a tradition I was told in whispers during the second week, exclusively for counselors. Once a week, after making sure all the campers were fast asleep, checking the cabins at 10 p.m., lights out and snoring confirmed, we would gather in the clearing by the old oak tree, a secluded spot in the heart of the forest. A 15-minute walk from the main camp, marked by a twisted oak tree that looked like an accusing finger pointing at the moon. The first time the previous summer had been exciting. A kind of reverse hide-and-seek in the dark that made us feel alive after days of responsibilities. One was the hunter, armed only with a handheld flashlight that cast shaky beams between the trunks, and the rest of us were the prey, scattering into the woods with racing pulses. Whoever was caught, the beam of light falling on your face, the cry of "Gotcha!" became the next hunter. It was adrenaline-fueled, a way to release the pent-up energy after a whole day of smiling at children who cried for their mothers or complained of blisters, the forest amplifying every creak and every nervous laugh. The leader was Gareth, a 22-year-old muscular guy in a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-toned biceps and a white scar on his forearm from a bar fight in college, short brown hair that he combed with his fingers, and an easy smile that could convince a child to eat vegetables or a parent to donate more to the camp fund. He was the head counselor, everyone's favorite. The campers called him G-Man and ran into his arms for hugs that lasted a second too long, and the unquestioned referee of the hunt. "Simple rules," he always said at the beginning, standing in the center of the clearing with a flashlight in his hand, the light casting long shadows on his face like a tribal mask. "The boundaries of the forest are marked with orange tape. Don't go outside them. The hunter counts to 100. The rest of you, run. Last to be found, exempt. Those caught pay the price. Understood?" We nodded. The group of 10 counselors, veterans like me, Chloe, Mark, and newbies like Tim, Sarah, Ben, formed a semicircle, cheap whiskey passing from hand to hand to warm the blood. That first night of the summer, my third, I noticed a subtle change in the oak grove. the air already cool with the smell of damp earth and smoke from a dying campfire. The atmosphere was different. Fewer nervous laughs dissipating in the wind, more silent anticipation weighing like fog. The counselors gathered in small groups, whispering about this year will be more intense. Chloe avoiding Gareth's gaze as she adjusted her sweatshirt, Ben biting his fingernail with his eyes fixed on the ground. Gareth stood in the center, the black duffel bag at his feet like a sack of sinister tricks, and raised his hands. Welcome back, Cubs. The rules are simple. Hide within the boundaries marked with tape. Tonight's hunter is Ben. Ben, the quiet newcomer with glasses and a penchant for survival books he read during breaks, took the flashlight from Gareth with slightly trembling hands, the beam flickering before stabilizing. Count to 100, no cheating, Gareth said, patting his shoulder with a thump that sounded like a warning. Ben nodded, swallowing hard. 1, 2, and the group scattered into the darkness, branches crunching under boots. The forest swallowing us like a living mouth. I ran toward a cluster of dense bushes 50 yards from the clearing, my heart pounding in my ears, the cold air filling my lungs with the scent of pine and earth. I crouched behind a fallen log covered in moss, the damp bark against my back, and waited. Ben's count distant like an echo. 98, 99, 100. The first few minutes were pure pulse. Ben's flashlight beam sweeping the trees like a mad lighthouse, his voice shouting, "I heard you, Mark." In the distance, nervous laughter when someone stumbled. I heard Chloe nearby, her breath coming in gasps in a thicket 10 meters away, and Tim cursing under his breath as he stepped on a branch. The forest amplified everything. A rustle of leaves was a footstep, a whisper of wind, a voice. My leg cramped, cold sweat running down my back, and I shifted slightly, the moss crunching under my weight, too loud. The beam grazed past, and I held my breath, counting seconds in my head. 10, 20. Ben shouted, "Chloe, I've got you," to my left, his flashlight illuminating an orange flash of his t-shirt. 30, 40. The forest seemed to close in, branches like fingers, and playful fear mixed with something else, a tingle of, what if it doesn't stop? Finally, his light found me after 45 minutes, the beam falling on my face like a blinding spotlight. Frank, the last one. I got up, laughing forcedly to hide my relief, and we returned to the clearing as a group, Ben panting with pride. Gareth was waiting for us, the bag open at his feet, and he pulled out a handful of clothespins, the big wooden ones with strong springs that mothers used to hang clothes on the camp clothesline. "Welcome back, Cubs," he said, his voice a whisper laden with authority that cut through the night air. "The rules are simple. Hide within the marked boundaries. But this year," he continued, smiling with white teeth in the dim light, "we're going to add a little incentive to run faster." The group murmured, nervous laughter running through them like a chill. Chloe crossed her arms. "Gareth, what is it?" He ignored her, holding the tongs aloft. "The last to be found is exempt from punishment. The others, well, they'll have to pay a small price." A reminder that being slow has consequences. Arms up for those caught. Nervous laughter erupted, Tim joking, "I run like the wind." But I felt a chill in my stomach. The price hanging like a veiled threat. Ben counted again. 1, 2, and we ran off, the forest swallowing us with creaks and gasps. I hid behind the same log, the damp moss against my back, but this time the count seemed to take forever. The forest alive with sounds. Chloe's footsteps to my right, Mark's "shh" in the distance. Ben shouted, "Tim, I've got you." After 15 minutes, his flashlight illuminating a flash of movement. 20 minutes. Sarah. 30. Chloe, her muffled cry of "shit." 40. Mark. I was last. The beam falling on my face after 50 minutes, Ben panting. Frank, exempt. I returned to the clearing. The group gathered in a semicircle under the moon, Gareth with the tongs in his hand. Those caught, Tim, Sarah, Chloe, Mark, arms up. Tim raised his arms first, laughing nervously. This is ridiculous. Gareth placed 3 tweezers on the sensitive skin on the inside of each arm, the click of the spring echoing, Tim hissing, "Ouch, fuck." Sarah followed, biting her lip. "Gareth, it hurts." He smiled. "That's why you run faster next time." Chloe raised her arms, trembling, the clips closing on her pale skin, a moan escaping. "Stop." Mark growled in pain, the springs biting into flesh. I watched, exempt. But the knot in my stomach grew. The clips hanging like grotesque jewelry, the group holding their breath. "A lesson in speed," Gareth said, passing around a bottle of cheap whiskey that burned in the throat. "Next time, run faster." I drank, the alcohol washing away the discomfort, and we laughed awkwardly around the makeshift campfire. Gareth telling a story from his first year. They caught me in 2 minutes, clips everywhere. But Chloe rubbed her arms silently, Ben staring at the ground. The following days at camp were a precarious balance. Communal breakfasts in the dining room, with scrambled eggs that cooled quickly and sour orange juice. Daytime activities where I smiled at children running with sticks as swords. Timmy winning a sack race. Lisa sticking pine cones on a collage that looked like a dragon. Afternoons swimming in the lake where lifeguards shouted, "Don't run on the dock." And evenings of gatherings on the porch of the main cabin with beers from a shared cooler that we passed around in a circle. But the nighttime tension seeped in. Chloe avoided Gareth's gaze during conversations, rubbing her arms where the pink marks were slow to fade. Tim joked less, staring at the duffel bag when Gareth mentioned it. Ben read his survival books aloud, as if searching for escape in the pages. I felt the weight of complicity. The price, like a shared secret that bound us in silence. One afternoon, during a craft activity with the pioneers, children painting rocks as treasures, Chloe approached me. "Frank, about the tweezers. Are you okay?" I nodded. "Yes. You?" She looked at Gareth chatting with campers. "I don't know. It was weird." "Tradition," I muttered, but the knot returned. The second hunt came a week later, on Wednesday, after a stormy day that left the forest muddy and the children complaining about mud in their boots. The cabin check was quick. "All asleep, sir." And we gathered in the oak clearing, the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and fallen leaves. Gareth arrived with the bag. But this time he took out a roll of glass marbles and wide adhesive tape. To improve stealth, cubs, the punishment for the last 3, running barefoot back to this clearing on a path of marbles. Nervous murmurs. "Tim." "Gareth, that hurts." He smiled. "That's why you run faster." Ben counted 1, 2, and we set off, the mud sucking at our boots, me toward a group of bushes where I had hidden well last year. I crouched down, my heart pounding, the counting distant. First one's caught. Sarah after 10 minutes, her cry of "no," followed by a flashlight. 15. Tim, cursing. 20. Chloe, panting near me. 30. Mark. I was the second to last at 45, the beam falling on my face. Frank. We returned muddy, Gareth scattering marbles along a 10-meter path. Barefoot, all 4 of you. Last one exempt. Tim took off his boots first, stepping with a hiss. "Shit, they're sharp." Sarah limped, tears. "This is cruel." Chloe stepped on one and screamed, the glass cutting her foot. "Stop." I ran, marbles rolling under my feet, sharp pain with every step, bruises forming instantly. Mark was last, exempt, but the group was silent, the whiskey going down like bitter medicine. Post-game conversations were tense around the campfire, Tim rubbing his bleeding feet. Gareth goes too far. Chloe. It's tradition, but it really hurts. Ben. Last year was worse. Mark. Shut up or he'll hear us. Gareth approached. Good hunt. Who wants whiskey? We drank, the alcohol burning, but the silence grew, glances averted as he told stories. One night, alone with Chloe on the porch, Frank, Do you think he'll stop? He's Gareth. Leader. But fear took root, the forest whispering warnings. The third hunt was the turning point on Friday. After a rainy day that left puddles and children with colds, quick check, asleep, and into the clearing, the air thick, Gareth with the toolbox, hammer, nails, boards. Tonight is special, he said, his voice low. Today we test loyalty to the hunt. Whispers. Sarah. Gareth what? Him. The hunter is Frank. I nodded, flashlight in hand, counting 100, the group scattering. I hunted Tim first, his flashlight falling into the bushes. Sarah at 15, screaming. Chloe at 30, her no muffled. Mark second to last at 45. I was last, the beam of my own flashlight bouncing off my face when I returned. The two losers, Chloe and me, said Gareth. We knelt in front of the oak tree, board on roots. Chloe holds. Frank nails. Frank, me, took the hammer, hands shaking. Gareth no. Him. Loyalty or weakness? Chloe raised her hands, tears. Please. The hammer fell, the nails sinking an inch from her fingers, the thud echoing. She sobbed. Another nail, a muffled cry, 4 in total squaring around her white hands. Gareth ripped off the board. Loyalty. The group silent, whiskey passing like poison. The following days were surreal. Mornings of cold egg breakfasts, daytime activities smiling for the children, Timmy winning races, Lisa drawing, but tense nights, Chloe silently rubbing her marked hands, Tim avoiding Gareth. Pressure. Gareth to me in the dining room. Good job with the board. It shows strength. It was intense. He smiled. That's the hunt. It brings people together. But the weight grew, whispered conversations with Chloe. Frank, let's leave. Don't break up the group. The fourth hunt came too soon, on Wednesday, after a storm that left mud and colds. Check in, to the clearing with torches. Gareth with knife, bandages, jar of shoe polish, blowtorch. Final initiation, marked. No draw. He the hunter. Face fear. We are predators. He counted, scattering. I hunted no one. Gareth caught us all in minutes, flashlight sweeping like a predator. We returned, table with objects. Marked with shoe polish, sealed with fire. He dipped his finger in shoe polish, traced a line on Mark's chest. One of us. Chloe, Ben, everyone. To me, cold finger on skin, black line from sternum. Loyalty, then blowtorch, blue flame. Frank first. No, I said, stepping between him and Chloe. It's over. He smiled. Choice. Mark or traitor. He advanced, blowtorch crackling. I roared, no. I turned and ran to camp, packing trembling, drove in the rain at dawn. I never reported it. What could I say? I participated. Fear of Gareth, of the pack. Rumors. Fired the following year for inappropriate behavior. Horror not in ghosts, but in human cruelty, fear, and belonging eroding empathy. At night, I smell shoe polish. I feel the black line. Evil is the monitor with the blowtorch and the smile, the silence of those who could have stopped it. There is a fundamental difference between the fear you feel in a movie, a quick jump with strident string music, and a shadow revealed in the last frame, leaving room for the relief of "it was just the cat," and the fear that freezes the blood in your veins when it is real, raw, and without a Hollywood script to rescue you. The first is a safe emotion contained by the screen, something that makes you hug your pillow and laugh afterwards with friends about what a scare. The second is a primitive animal that unleashes itself inside you, clouding your reason, accelerating your pulse until you feel your heart is going to break your ribs, and screaming a single word in your mind, repeated like a mantra of survival: run. That animal awoke in me during a weekend camping trip deep in the Great Smoky Mountains National Forest, a place Leo swore was off-the-grid paradise, but which became a maze of doubts and shadows. Its roar still echoes in my ears when I close my eyes on quiet nights in Portland. And even though months have passed, 4 to be exact, if I count from that October 2024, the lake with its still deceptive water continues to appear in my dreams, reflecting not indifferent stars, but pale eyes staring at me from the bottom, waiting for me to return. The campout was an annual tradition with my 3 best friends from college. Leo, the meticulous planner, who printed detailed itineraries and checklists for each excursion, with columns for potential risks and plan Bs. Chloe, the adventurer with an overly trusting heart, who always insisted on trying the new trail or camping without a tent to feel the stars. And Mark, the skeptic, who always laughed at my hunches with a frank, "Relax, not everything is a CIA conspiracy." We met in a marine biology class at Portland University, brought together by a failed project on ocean currents that ended with us drinking beer in a campus bar, arguing about whether whales sang out of loneliness or territory. Since then, every summer we escaped the routine. One year on the beaches of Oregon, with bonfires on the wet sand and crabs that Chloe tried to adopt. Another in the dunes of Florence, with kite surfing that almost killed us when the wind dragged us into the ocean, laughing hysterically once we were safe. This year, in October, Leo had found a supposedly pristine spot, far from the tourist areas crowded with families, with coolers, screaming children, and buzzing drones. Great Smoky Mountains National Forest, Northern Sector, he announced at our planning dinner at a taqueria in downtown Portland, unfolding a printed map with routes marked in yellow highlighter and notes in the margins. Deer Creek, secluded clearing. 2 hours from here, no cell phone signal, perfect for truly disconnecting. Chloe applauded, pico de gallo sauce on her chin. Yes, no work emails or Instagram notifications, just us, the forest, and maybe a friendly bear. Mark raised his carnitas taco, skeptical as always. As long as there's cold beer and no killer mosquitoes the size of fists. Is there a crime record around there? Leo laughed. 0. It's a protected area, just deer and peace. I hesitated for a second. Work had me with a deadline for financial reports that were piling up like storm clouds in my inbox, and the rain forecast for the weekend didn't help. But I nodded, the fatigue of the city weighing on me. Go ahead. I need to reset my brain. Count me in. We packed that week in a marathon of group messages, me with my old college backpack, filled with a compact sleeping bag that smelled of mothballs, a headlamp with extra batteries, and a pocket mystery book, The Silence of the Lake by Harlan Coben, ironic now, for the long nights. Leo with his hard cooler loaded with diet sodas, turkey sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap that wouldn't wrinkle, and a first aid kit that looked like it came from a field hospital, with Band-Aids, antihistamines, and even a tourniquet in case of a bear. Chloe with her acoustic guitar wrapped in a padded case and an industrial mosquito repellent spray that she swore killed elephants. Mark with a 6-pack of local beer for the campfire, not to get drunk. A folding machete, in case there are branches on the trail, that he joked was for cutting sandwiches or zombie heads, and his trusty Swiss Army knife that he always lost in the grass. The trip began on Friday afternoon, after I left work early. A quick email to my boss, Mr. Hargrove, with the subject line, "Urgent Family Matter, back Monday with full reports." The traffic on I-5, a slow river of cars, with red taillights blinking like irritated eyes in the exhaust fog. Leo drove his gray Subaru Outback, the trunk packed to the roof, with gear that squeaked at every turn on the highway, the air conditioning battling the sticky late October heat seeping in through the half-open windows. Mark was DJing from the back seat, connected to the Bluetooth speakers with a classic rock playlist he had put together the night before. Bruce Springsteen howling about lonely cars and endless highways, followed by Pearl Jam for the raw forest vibe, the bass rumbling in our chests. Chloe sang along loudly from the middle seat, deliberately singing the lyrics to Jeremy, out of tune to make us laugh. At home, he braids my hair. That's draws the blinds, not braids, Mark corrected, throwing a wrapped piece of gum at her that bounced off her shoulder. I was in the passenger seat, Leo's physical map on my lap, even though the GPS on my phone showed the route with green arrows. Turn right at exit 52, then straight on 26 for about 15 kilometers. We stopped at a gas station along the way. A dusty place with rusty pumps and a store that smelled of burnt coffee and hot dogs spinning on a roller to stretch our legs and buy emergency supplies. Mark loading up a family-sized bag of spicy Doritos for midnight hunger guys and to scare bears away with the smell. Chloe buying a crumpled paper topographic map that she unfolded on the hood of the car, in case the GPS fails and we get lost like in that horror movie. Leo filling the tank with premium diesel, better safe than sorry. And me buying a can of energy drinks that I downed in one gulp, the fizz rising acidically to chase away the sleepiness accumulated from nights of reports. The rest of the trip was filled with silly chatter that flowed like the relieved traffic. Leo detailing the weekend itinerary. Arrival at sunset, light dinner, bonfire until 11, early night for the hike at dawn on Saturday. Chloe recounting a failed Tinder hookup from last month. He ghosted me after 2 dates and an awkward kiss at the bar. Who does that in 2024? Mark imitating his roommate in a fight over rent. Pay up, or I'm kicking you out with your guitar and your pride. And me sharing the latest office drama. Hargrove almost fired me over a mistake in the Q3 report, but I saved it with an all-nighter. I laughed with them, the stress of Portland dissipating with every mile. The urban landscape of gray buildings and billboards giving way to green hills dotted with pine trees that closed in like a living tunnel. The sun filtering through in golden rays that warmed the dashboard. This is what I needed, I said, rolling down the window to let in the fresh air, smelling of earth and fallen leaves. Chloe leaned forward. Yes, no notifications, just us in the forest. Who wants a horror story for the road? Mark. No thanks. I've got enough with Chloe's Instagram account. We arrived at dusk on Friday, the sun setting blood red behind the rugged mountains flanking the clearing, the sky tinged purple and orange like a fresh bruise. Deer Creek was as beautiful as in the photos Leo had sent to the group chat. A green space about 30 meters in diameter, surrounded by ancient oak trees with gnarled trunks covered in dry ivy and towering fir trees swaying in the gentle breeze, whispering like a distant choir. The stream was a silvery thread winding to our right, murmuring over smooth, mossy rocks, glistening with the day's residual dew, the cold water occasionally splashing against the gravel banks. We parked the Subaru in a gravel hollow marked by an old, splintered wooden post, unloaded the equipment with the efficiency of 4 years of practice. Mark and I dismantling the 2 tents, a 4-person one for the boys, and a 2-person one for Chloe, who insisted on personal space. Chloe and Leo preparing the cooler on the wooden picnic table, splintered from years of use, ice crunching as it was poured over sodas and sandwiches. To tradition, Leo toasted with a cold beer from the cooler, clinking bottles with us in a metallic clink that echoed in the empty clearing, the icy glass against my sweaty palm. Chloe took her acoustic guitar out of its padded case, strumming a clumsy version of Horse with No Name that was out of tune in the high notes, and Mark told stories from past camps. Remember when Leo got lost for 10 minutes in the dunes and cried like a baby, laughing until tears ran down his cheeks, the fire that Jake, Mark, lit with dry branches we gathered from the ground, crackling to life with orange pops that sent sparks into the cool air. We roasted sausages skewered on sticks sharpened with Swiss Army knives, the smoke rising in gray spirals that disappeared into the purple sky, the smell of charred meat mingling with the resinous pine. We were the only human beings for miles around, or so we thought. The forest closed in around the clearing like a living wall of trunks and leaves, the stream the only witness to our laughter, and the invisible lake in the distance reflecting the first stars that began to prick the black sky like needles. But on the first night, the feeling came with the darkness that fell like a heavy, suffocating curtain, the sun disappearing behind the mountains and leaving a sky dotted with cold, indifferent stars that twinkled like distant eyes. As the fire reduced to orange embers that crackled low and threw occasional sparks into the air, and the forest filled with nighttime sounds, the distant hooting of an owl that sounded like a lament, the intermittent crackling of branches under something invisible sniffing berries, I felt that itch on the back of my neck, that ancient feeling of being watched that makes you turn your head for no apparent reason, the hairs standing on end as if the air itself were brushing you with icy fingers. I attributed it to the nerves of being so isolated, Leo's phone showing no signal since the last mile of paved road, the GPS frozen on a static map that was no longer updating, and Mark joked from his sleeping bag unrolled on the ground. "Frank, are you hearing ghosts, or is it your conscience for not answering emails?" Chloe laughed, but her guitar sounded a little strained now, the notes of Black Hole Sun discordant in the growing silence of the clearing. "It's the wind, guys. The forest is talking." Leo stirred the embers with a stick that snapped dryly. A deer, for sure, or a raccoon with heavy feet. But the subtle knot in my stomach didn't untangle, and when we turned off our flashlights one by one, Chloe's clicked first, then Mark's, the tent zipper closing with a final zip that sounded too loud and final in the stillness. I lay awake for a long time, the sleeping bag suffocating against my skin, the stream murmuring in the distance like a slow clock, counting down the seconds to something inevitable. "Hey, do you hear that?" Chloe said suddenly from her tent next door, her voice a sharp whisper that tore through the silence like a knife, the zipper of her tent opening slightly with a metallic scrape that amplified the pulse in my ears. We fell into collective silence, Mark's sleeping bag rustling as he sat up abruptly in his tent. "What's going on, a bear?" Beyond the residual crackling of the embers, cooling in the stone ring, and the steady stream like an underground heartbeat, there was another sound. A dry, rhythmic crunch, not the random crunch of a branch falling in the wind, or a small animal sniffing fallen berries. It was a footstep, heavy, slow, deliberate, like leather boots stepping on loose gravel about 20 meters from the clearing, at the edge of the forest, where the moonlight filtered through the treetops did not reach, only dense shadows that moved with the sound. The crunch repeated closer this time, 15 meters perhaps, a steady rhythm that echoed in my chest, as if the forest itself were walking. "A deer," Mark said with a forced smile that couldn't be seen in the darkness of his tent, his voice a little louder than normal, as if trying to convince himself as he peered out through the zipper. "Or a big raccoon wearing hiking boots." Leo stirred in his sleeping bag, the rustle of fabric breaking the silence. "Sure, let's sleep. Tomorrow's fishing." But Chloe didn't laugh. Her flashlight clicked on, casting a shaky beam from her tent, sweeping across the half-open zipper. It sounded human, like footsteps. The footsteps stopped abruptly 10 meters away, the silence that followed 10 times more terrifying than the initial noise, oppressive and heavy, as if whoever was out there had frozen at the edge of the ember's light, listening to us breathe, studying us in the darkness with ears as sharp as blades. Leo grabbed his powerful flashlight from his backpack, the 1,000 lumen one he had bought for blackout emergencies on past camping trips, and stepped out of the tent with a zipper tearing through the air, the beam of light cutting through the blackness of the clearing like a hot knife through butter, illuminating gnarled logs with cracked bark, ferns swaying in the gentle wind like green waves, and shadows that twisted and lengthened as the light passed quickly, creating shapes that looked like hunched figures before dissipating. There was nothing visible, just the stream reflecting the beam like a mirror broken into silver fragments. But the forest seemed to hold its collective breath, the silence amplifying our shallow panting and the pulse in my temples. "Come on, let's not be paranoid," Mark said from his sleeping bag, his voice lacking its usual skeptical conviction, as if trying to convince himself as he peered out the zipper of his tent, Chloe's flashlight joining the sweep in a duet of erratically dancing beams. "It's the forest at night. It always sounds like this. Branches, animals, wind. Sleep, Frank. Tomorrow you'll laugh. But Chloe didn't turn off her light, the beam trembling in her hand. I don't know. I felt something, like eyes. Leo returned to the tent, the beam turning off with a click that echoed too loudly. Nothing. Just branches and leaves. Let's go to sleep. We have to get up early for the hike. I nodded from my sleeping bag, the zipper closing again with a final zip that sounded definitive, but the knot in my stomach didn't completely disappear. I lay awake for a long time, the sleeping bag suffocating against my sweaty skin, the stream murmuring in the distance like a slow clock counting down the seconds to an uncertain dawn, every distant crackle, a branch, a rodent, a possible approaching footstep. The next morning, the sun dispelled much of our residual fear, with a golden dawn filtering rays through the oak canopy. The clearing bathed in light that made the stream sparkle like liquid silver, and the ferns unfurl like green fans. We ate instant pancakes cooked in a skillet over the revived embers, Leo stirring the batter with a long wooden spoon, Chloe adding dried raisins that work magic for energy. Chewing with views of the invisible lake in the distance, the smoke from the campfire rising lazily in spirals that disappeared into the blue sky. Day 2. Hike upstream, Leo announced, unfolding the crumpled map on the splintered wooden picnic table, his index finger tracing the red route marked with highlighter. 2 easy miles, passes a lookout point overlooking the valley, return before noon for picnic. Chloe rolled up her sleeping bag with quick movements, the canvas rustling. Yes, and we'll pick berries along the way. Mark, you taste them first to see if they're poisonous. He raised his improvised breakfast stack, a rolled pancake with syrup. As long as they're not like you're cooking, everything's fine. I laughed, the stress of the previous night dissipating with the movement and the sun warming my face, but the forest felt a little more closed in that morning, the oak trees whispering in the wind as if sharing gossip about our failed vigil. We packed light backpacks, reusable water bottles filled to the brim, tuna sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap that wouldn't wrinkle in the heat, granola bars for Chloe that she swore give you superpowers, and set off on the trail, the mud from the night's rain slightly sucking at our hiking boots, which crunched with every step. The hike was pleasant at first, the sun rising and warming the cool morning air. The stream to our right bubbling over smooth, mossy rocks, glistening with residual dew, birds chirping in the oak trees that flanked the path like distracted guardians. Light conversation flowed with the movement, Leo detailing a recent promotion in his digital marketing job. New boss, but a bonus at last if I close this e-commerce client. Chloe recounting a true crime podcast she heard in the car. A killer who left marks on trees like X's for territory. Mark imitating his roommate in a fight over rent. Pay up or I'll kick you out with your guitar and your frustrated musician pride. And me sharing the latest office drama. Hargrove almost fired me for a mistake in the Q3 report, but I saved him with an all-nighter and intravenous coffee. I laughed with them, the pulse of the previous night calming to a normal heartbeat. But the trail narrowed after the first mile, the roots of the fir trees exposed like hidden traps that tripped Chloe. Damn root. And the chatter turned to gasps as the slope steepened. We took turns helping. Mark carrying Chloe's backpack when she complained of straps cutting in, Leo checking the map at every turn. 500 meters to the lookout. Half a mile from the peak, Leo found the first sign that shattered the illusion of normality, stopping abruptly next to a large oak tree at the edge of the trail, its gnarled trunk covered in dry ivy that peeled off in strips like dead skin. "Guys, look at this," he said, his voice low, pointing at eye level with a slightly trembling finger. There was a deep X carved into the bark, the knife sunk deep enough that the wood inside was pale and fresh, sap juice drying into amber drops that still glistened in the dappled sunlight. It wasn't a natural gash from deer rubbing antlers in rut, or a casual scratch from a fallen branch. It was clean, deliberate, The cuts crossed with geometric precision, as if someone had measured the angle with a ruler before pressing the blade. Chloe took a step closer, touching the edge with her fingertip. "It's like a treasure mark. Pirates in the woods." Her voice was tentative, her usual optimism tinged with doubt. Mark laughed nervously, spitting into the stream. "Or a private property, warning from some crazy forest dweller. Let's move on. It's not worth it." But Leo frowned, pulling his phone out of his jacket pocket. Weak signal, a single bar blinking mockingly, to take a quick flash photo that illuminated the stark white X. It's not recent, but it's not old either. The sap isn't completely dry. Someone came through here with a knife days ago, maybe yesterday. I looked around, the stream murmuring indifferently behind us, the forest closing in with pine trees that now seemed to be leaning their branches toward us. A hiker marking a trail, or a hunter. Let's not dramatize. But the knot in my stomach returned, subtle but persistent, and we quickened our pace, the trail seeming narrower with each bend, the roots exposed like veins beneath the earth, causing Mark to stumble. Damn, I almost killed myself. The hike continued uphill, the sun rising and warming the air until sweat beaded on our foreheads. But the light-hearted joy of the beginning had been tinged with a constant vigilance that made every step sound too loud in the silence of the forest. Our ears attuned to any sound other than the splashing of the stream or the crunch of gravel under our boots. We took turns looking back, me first, turning every 100 yards with my heart beating a little faster, the empty trail behind us like a black tunnel. Then Mark. "Nothing. Relax, Frank. This isn't the Blair Witch Project." But the forest felt alive in a new way, the oaks whispering in the wind, as if sharing gossip about our intrusion, every shadow between the trunks a possible crouching figure. At a bend where the path curved alongside a rocky outcrop covered in damp green moss, Chloe saw the movement first, stopping with a gasp that cut off the chatter. Leo telling a joke about a stupid customer, her hand rising to point to the opposite bank of the stream, 20 meters across the bubbling water. There, in the bushes, look. We turned in unison, the group freezing like statues, and for an eternal second we saw the figure. Tall, hunched like an animal on all fours, rising, emerging from the dense undergrowth on the other side, the camouflage of his jacket blending into the green, but the movement betraying him. A broad shoulder, a bald or shaved head turning. It only lasted a blink, the sun reflecting off something metallic in his hand, a knife perhaps, and he disappeared into the trees as if the forest had swallowed him whole, the branches closing behind him. "What was that?" I said, my voice coming out higher than intended, my pulse racing in my ears, pointing to the empty spot where he had been. The others looked. Chloe still with her finger raised, Leo pulling binoculars from the pocket of his waterproof backpack. "I don't see anything." "A deer?" But his tone was uncertain, the binoculars scanning the opposite bank where the stream separated the trail like a fragile barrier, the cold water, splashing rocks that glistened in the sun. Mark spat on the ground, the sound too loud. "Or a hiker. Relax, it's not the man in the woods." But Chloe pressed herself against me, her shoulder brushing mine. It looked at me. I swear it looked right at me. We quickened our pace without saying a word, the trail seeming to narrow with every turn, the roots of the fir trees exposed like traps that tripped Mark. Damn, that root almost killed me. The stream between us now a dubious comfort, its constant murmur a reminder that something was following us, invisible but present. We returned to camp at dusk, the sun setting orange behind the rugged mountains flanking the clearing. Our morale at rock bottom, half-eaten tuna sandwiches forgotten in the backpacks that hung heavily from our shoulders. The clearing seemed more exposed now, the ring of stones from the previous night's campfire cold and empty, the stream winding to our right like an indifferent witness that had seen too much. And then we found the second message, in the exact center of the clearing, right where we had been sitting around the fire the night before, the embers now a circle of cold gray ashes that smelled of stale smoke. Right in the middle, a small pile of stones stacked with meticulous care. Not a casual heap from an animal rummaging or a capricious wind, but an unstable tower about a foot high. 6 smooth stones balanced precisely like a miniature obelisk defying gravity. The base wide and the top pointed, pointing to the cloudy sky. And on the top stone, flat and round like an altar, placed with surgical delicacy, a dead bird. A small, fragile robin, its orange breast stained with dried mud and blood clotted in dark threads. Its neck twisted at an impossible angle that screamed deliberate violence. Its wings folded against its limp body as if in a broken, silent prayer. Chloe let out a muffled cry that came out of her throat like a stifled sob, covering her mouth with trembling hands, her eyes wide and fixed on the bird as if she couldn't believe it. Mark turned pale instantly, taking a clumsy step back that crunched the gravel beneath his boots. What the hell? Who put that there? Leo cursed under his breath, kneeling a meter away to look without touching, his hand raised as if to stop time. It's not natural. Someone killed it and placed it there. Look at the neck, broken on purpose. I stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, my stomach churning into an acidic knot, the bird staring up at the sky with glassy, blind eyes that reflected the setting sun in dull flashes, its feathers ruffled as if it had struggled before dying. This was no longer childish paranoia or a passing fright of the woods. It was deliberate communication, a message in broken feathers and balanced stones that said with brutal clarity, I know where you are. I can enter your space whenever I want, and I can kill, slowly or quickly. The clearing, once a sanctuary of laughter and campfires, now looked like the scene of a macabre ritual. The ring of ashes, a circle of invocation, where the bird was the sacrifice. Let's call the police, said Chloe, her voice trembling as she took her phone out of her jacket pocket with fingers that didn't quite obey her. Signal here, 2 flashing bars. Come on, answer. But Leo stopped her with a hand on her arm, his eyes fixed on the tower. It's a bird. It could be a scavenger that left it there, or a joke by some distant camper. We don't want to look crazy calling about a nest of pebbles. Mark spat on the ground, the sound too loud in the sudden silence. It's a threat, Leo. Who else is here? Does a bear put stones? We argued for 5 tense minutes in the clearing that now felt exposed under the darkening sky, voices rising in a chorus of panic. Chloe, get out now, I don't feel safe. Mark, yeah, I'm packing now. But the sun was setting fast, the shadows of the oak trees lengthening like accusing fingers toward the creek. And Leo, his voice firm as ever. It's already dark. Driving on these winding forest roads at night is suicide. Blind curves, potholes, deer jumping out. We're staying one more night. We'll close ranks, take turns keeping watch every hour, and leave at dawn with the first ray of light. Agreed. We nodded reluctantly, fear overcoming logic, and buried the bird under stones in the ring of ashes. So it can rest, said Chloe, her voice breaking, her hands dirty with damp earth. Panic, cold, and rational like an engineer's calculation measuring loads on an unstable bridge, began to take hold of us that afternoon as we packed food in the cooler in case we have to flee quickly in the night. Leo organizing cans of soup and granola bars in precise rows. Chloe filling water bottles to the brim with hands that trembled and spilled drops on the table. Mark checked the car with quick steps, opening the trunk and the hood. Tank full yesterday, keys on the key ring, spare tire inflated. Chloe pulled her pepper spray from the bottom of her backpack. Just in case. You know. Leo spread the map on the ground in the clearing, his finger tracing alternative routes. Emergency trail to the south, 2 miles to the main road if they block the way. I checked the first aid kit open on the table, counting band-aids, painkillers, and a roll of bandages that smelled like a factory. If anyone cuts themselves, we'll bandage them up, but no panic. The clearing felt exposed now, the stream an indifferent witness murmuring incessantly, and every distant rustle, a rabbit jumping among the bushes, the wind rustling the tall branches, made us all turn around. hands reaching into pockets for keys or the spray that Chloe passed around like a talisman. We ate cold turkey and cheese sandwiches for dinner, sitting back to back in the center of the clearing on a blanket spread out on the gravel, plastic forks piercing dry bread that tasted like cardboard, the filling cold and flavorless. "A stalker," Mark muttered, chewing mechanically, his eyes fixed on the darkening forest. "Like in that 80s horror movie, The Guy with the Axe Who Lives in the Woods." Leo swallowed hard. "Not a movie. Real. What if he has a gun?" Chloe, her voice low. "If he attacks us tonight, what then? Do we run to the creek?" I checked my phone for the umpteenth time, the signal rising to a weak bar that flickered mockingly. "I'll try to call if it gets worse." The sun sank, the sky turning from orange to purple. And the knot in my stomach tightened with every passing minute, the forest closing in like a giant hand. That night, there was no campfire or Chloe's guitar. The embers from the afternoon died out on their own with a sigh of residual smoke that smelled of contained fear. And we sat together in the largest tent, the 6-person one Leo brought for comfort in emergencies, back to back in sleeping bags unrolled on the canvas floor, flashlights on low mode casting dancing shadows on the nylon walls like restless fingers. The forest, once a chorus of natural sounds that lulled us, owls hooting in the distance like lonely laments, leaves whispering in the gentle wind, had become a vast ocean of hidden threats where every crackle was a possible approaching footstep, every whisper of branches a stranger's breath lurking on the periphery. We took turns keeping watch every hour so we wouldn't get exhausted. Leo first, from 10 p.m. to 11, sitting at the entrance to the tent with a powerful flashlight in his lap, the beam sweeping the clearing every 2 minutes. Nothing, just the stream. But his knee bouncing against mine betrayed his racing pulse. Chloe from 11 to midnight, visibly shaking with pepper spray in her hand. I'm not sleeping. What if it gets in through the zipper? Mark from midnight to 1 a.m., multi-purpose knife open in his sleeping bag. I'll cut it if it comes near. Me from 1 to 2 a.m., sleep pulling at my eyelids heavy as lead, the stream a clock that wouldn't stop with its constant murmur. Each shift was pure tension, a stretched wire about to snap. Leo heard a splash in the lake at 10:30. Fisher. Someone throwing rocks. Chloe saw a long shadow in the trees at 11:15. There, look, it's moving. False alarm of a deer passing by. Mark gripped his knife at a creek at midnight. Footsteps, I swear. Just a raccoon sniffing around the forgotten cooler. Me, on my turn, the wind whispering guys, like a raspy voice, and I jumped, flashlight sweeping the empty clearing. Nothing, just leaves blowing. Fear fed on itself in the closed circle of the tent, doubts whispering, collective imagination, but instinct screaming, real, run, the tent zipper, a fragile portal between us and the darkness. Dawn came gray and slow, the sun filtering weakly through low clouds that hung like a veil. The clearing bathed in a pale, deceptively peaceful light that made the stream glisten like dirty silver, and the ferns unfurl like damp fans. We packed up camp with frantic, almost hysterical speed, hands shaking as we rolled up sleeping bags that smelled of cold sweat, tents folded crookedly and stuffed into cases that got stuck, the trunk of the Subaru slamming shut with a bang that echoed like a gunshot. Come on, come on, come on, Chloe repeated like a nervous mantra, loading the cooler with spilled sodas rolling around in the bottom, melted ice dripping onto her sneakers. Leo at the wheel, turning the key with fingers that weren't quite obeying him. Direct route to 26, no detours. Mark constantly checking the rearview mirror. If the car is following us, I filled water bottles from the last reserve. If it attacks, we run to the creek and scream. The engine roared to life, the Subaru turning around in the clearing with gravel flying under the wheels. And then he emerged from the forest like a materialized specter. He didn't walk quickly or clumsily. He emerged from among the dense fir trees at the edge of the compact dirt road, standing in the exact center, as if he had calculated the car's turn with clockwork precision, blocking our only exit with a tall, emaciated figure that looked like it had been carved from the trunk of a dead tree. It was the same man from the night and the hike. Dark, ragged clothes hanging loosely from bones, visible beneath taut skin. A gray beard tangled like dry roots, framing an angular sunken face. Pale eyes fixed on the windshield like frozen nails. In his right hand, raised casually but ready, was a long machete with a broad, rusted blade, the inner edge sharp enough to reflect the rising sun in a silver flash that blinded me for a second. We stared at each other through the dirty glass of the windshield, time stretching into a tense thread, his face a mask of something between contained rage and absolute emptiness, cracked lips curving into a grimace that didn't quite reach a smile. Then, without a word, he raised the machete and swung it through the air in a slow but deliberate arc that cut through the wind with an audible, high-pitched whistle, the blade whistling close to the hood like a veiled threat. "Run him over," Mark shouted from the back seat, his voice coming out in a shriek of pure panic that shattered the windshield glass with its sharpness, his hands clenching the passenger seat back until his knuckles turned white. Chloe covered her mouth with trembling palms, a muffled moan escaping between her fingers. "No, God, don't run him over." Leo instinctively slammed on the brakes, the car coming to a halt 3 meters away, with tires screeching on the loose gravel, the engine roaring in neutral. "I can't. It's a person." The man began to walk toward us with measured, confident steps. Not the clumsiness of a deranged madman, but the confidence of a predator who knows his prey is cornered in a dead-end alley, his boots crunching the dry earth at a pace that matched my racing pulse. He struck the hood of the Subaru with the handle of his machete, a dull, metallic thud that vibrated through the entire chassis and made us all jump in our seats, the impact reverberating in my teeth. "Get out, now," he roared, his voice rough as crushed gravel coming out of his throat, his pale eyes fixed on Leo through the glass, piercing like bullets. "Turn around," I shouted, pointing to the clearing behind us with a trembling finger, panic rising like acid bile. "Through the woods. Behind the stream there has to be a side exit." Leo, eyes wide and sweat beading on his forehead like pearls, shifted into drive with a jerk and floored the accelerator, the Subaru leaping forward, not toward the man, but to the edge of the clearing, tearing through low brush and thorny bushes that scraped the paint with high-pitched screeches like nails on a chalkboard, branches whipping the side windows with sharp blows. The man let out a growl of surprise. "Come back, you cowards." Then one of pure animal rage that echoed through the clearing, his figure chasing us with a frightening agility that didn't match his emaciated thinness, his raised machete cutting through the air in wild arcs. Chloe screamed from the back seat, looking out the fogged-up rear window. "He's following us. Look, the machete." I looked in the rearview mirror, my heart pounding in my throat. He was running behind us, his thin body pumping his legs like pistons, his face contorted into a mask of pure rage, with his mouth open in a silent scream, the machete gleaming in his right hand like an extension of his arm, whistling with every swing. He didn't run like a normal man, worn down by years of isolation. He ran like something possessed by an ancient fury, his boots stomping gravel and roots with leaps that closed the distance, the forest swallowing him and spitting him out in flashes between tree trunks. Leo drove blindly through the dense forest, the Subaru creaking and groaning with every impact against low logs and holes hidden by ferns, dodging centuries-old trees that stood like pillars in a Gothic cathedral, jumping over exposed roots that scraped the chassis with metallic squeaks. Low branches lashed the car's paintwork like angry whips, hitting the side windows with thud after thud that made the glass vibrate, leaves sticking to the windshield like green hands. It was a race against time and utter madness, the engine roaring in loud protest as Leo turned the steering wheel left and right, the dead GPS on the dashboard showing only a static map that was of no help. We knew that if the car got stuck in a muddy hole, Or, if we punctured a tire on a sharp rock, we were done for, trapped in the woods, with a man who saw us as intruders to be eliminated. "Faster!" Mark shouted, his voice a howl from the back, his hands gripping the headrest as if he could push the car. Chloe sobbed, "Don't look back, don't look!" I turned constantly, the rearview mirror showing flashes of our pursuer, him jumping over a fallen log, his machete raised in an arc cutting through low branches, his hoarse cry of, "Come back!" drowned out by the roar of the engine. Suddenly, through the dense pines that closed in like a living cage, we saw a flash of dull gray among the shadows, the asphalt of the main road, a saving thread winding south. "The road!" Leo shouted, his voice breaking with relief, straightening the steering wheel with a sharp turn that made the wheels squeal on the loose dirt. With one last effort from the engine, which roared like a wounded animal, the Subaru shot out of the forest and lurched violently onto the asphalt pavement, nearly tipping over on the edge, the front wheels skidding on gravel before gaining traction. Leo straightened the wheel with a sharp turn that threw us against the doors, the car stabilizing on the deserted straight, and he floored the accelerator, the speedometer climbing to 80 km/h in seconds, the wind whistling through the half-open windows. I glanced in the rearview mirror once more, my heart still racing. The man had emerged from the woods at the edge of the road, standing there with the machete hanging loosely at his side like a dead extension of his arm, watching us drive away with an expression that was not defeat but promise. An impassive face, pale eyes fixed on the receding car. His figure grew smaller and smaller, a lone black dot against the endless green of the forest, until a sharp bend in the road hid him forever, the asphalt curving like a healing wound. We drove in traumatized silence for 20 eternal minutes until we found a lonely gas station at the intersection with 26, a dusty place with rusty pumps humming under the midday sun, and a convenience store with flickering fluorescent lights illuminating shelves of gum and warm sodas. Our hands still trembled on our thighs like leaves in a storm, our clothes soaked in cold sweat that clung to our skin, the smell of earth and adrenaline filling the car like a stale perfume. Leo turned off the engine with a click that echoed too loudly, and Chloe yanked open the door, vomiting onto the cracked asphalt. God. Mark got out next, pale as a ghost, muttering, "I saw it. The machete. It was real." I got out last, my legs weak as jelly, and Leo took coins from the glove compartment for the rusty payphone stuck to the store wall. The receiver hanging loose, he dialed 911 with fingers slipping on the cold metal, his voice coming out broken to the operator. "Emergency. Man with machete in the woods. He attacked us in Arroyo del Ciervo. He chased us. Send help." The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Stay at the gas station. Description. Exact location." Leo stammered out details. Tall, thin, gray beard, ragged clothes, rusty machete. While the store clerk, an older man in a faded baseball cap, watched us from the doorway, frowning. "Everything okay, guys? You look like you've seen a ghost." 2 patrol cars arrived in 30 minutes that stretched like hours, blue and red lights sweeping the empty asphalt and gravel parking lot. Officers in muddy boots and reflective vests stepping out with their hands on their holsters. The sergeant in charge, a 40-year-old woman with a tight ponytail and a hardened expression named Ruiz, separated us on the hood of the Subaru for individual statements. "Tell me from the beginning, sir." My voice came out hoarse, repeating the trip, the arrival, the creaking, the X, the figure, the bird, the vigil, the dawn, and the blockade. The machete hit the hood, I swear. She wrote in a worn notebook, nodding without interrupting, but her eyes showed doubt. "Are you sure it wasn't a drunk hiker, or collective hallucination due to lack of sleep?" Mark, questioned next to her, raised his voice. "We saw it. 4 times. He threatened us with a slit throat." Chloe sobbed, his eyes empty, as if he were sizing us up. Leo, the rational one, showed photos of the bird, blurry from the hasty flash. This isn't imagination. Ruiz radioed, Unit 7, check North Sector Willamette, possible intruder with weapon. Description, tall, thin, gray beard. They escorted us back to the clearing in a convoy, an officer's ATV roaring ahead, the forest passing by like a green blur. The clearing was immaculate when we arrived, bathed in midday sun that made the stream glisten like innocent silver, and the ferns unfurl like harmless green fans. The ring of ashes cold and empty as if we had never lit a fire. The gravel path crunched under the agents' boots as they searched. Ruiz kneeling where the tower of stones had been. They said here, but only loose gravel and dry leaves, the bird gone as if the forest had claimed it. Scavengers, muttered a young agent digging with his boot. The X on the oak tree looked more worn now, the bark around it darkened by old sap, as if it were days or weeks old instead of hours. It could be a hunter marking his territory. Mark protested. It was fresh. The sap was dripping. Ruiz snapped his notebook shut. There's no physical evidence. Blurry photos, matching but pointless accounts. Are you sure it wasn't a prank by other campers? Or a hallucination caused by exhaustion and isolation? We looked at each other. 4 pale, exhausted adults with clothes dirty from mud and branches. A crazy story that sounded like collective delirium under the relentless sun. We saw it. The machete hit the hood. Look at the dent. Ruiz inspected it. It could be a branch. The young agent radioed. Negative, in sector. No machete, no intruder. Ruiz sighed. Go back to Portland. If he returns, call us with new details. In the meantime, post-traumatic stress therapy wouldn't hurt. The return trip was a limbo of silence broken by muffled murmurs. The I-5, a slow river of cars that mirrored my dulled mind. Mark, sleeping with his head against the window, dry sobs in his dreams. Leo checking the news on his phone once he had a signal. Suicide in Willamette, no details. His voice trembling. It's not him. Chloe staring into space, hands in her lap. His eyes. Empty. Like he was sizing us up for something. I drove the last few miles, hands gripping the steering wheel until it hurt, the forest in the rearview mirror like a living enemy receding but unforgiving. Calls from family that night in Portland, the apartment smelling of cold pizza that no one ate. My brother on the phone. Frank, are you okay? Leo called, he sounded hysterical. Yeah, bro, just a weird guy in the woods. Nothing serious. But I didn't give any details. The broken bird, the whistling machete, the chase through the trees. The secret of the clearing remained between us like a silent pact in the chat group we created that night. No more camping, never. And we don't talk to anyone. Mark replied first. Okay, delete the lake from the maps. Chloe, I dream about it. What if it comes back? Leo, it won't come back. But if anything happens, we'll call. It's been 2 months since then, and Deer Creek no longer exists for me. It's his creek. A name I deleted from my mental maps and hiking apps. A place I avoid in casual conversation with, we're never camping again. I live in Portland with my daily routine that tries to normalize the abnormal. I work at a logistics app startup, where I code safe route lines for urban deliveries. Ironic. Now I check every street on Google Maps before I leave. I have dinner with Leo on Thursdays at a taqueria downtown where we talk about everything except the weekend. New project. Beers with Mark on Fridays at a bar with sports screens where he jokes about forest hookups to break the ice but changes the subject if I insist. Climbing with Chloe on Saturdays at indoor walls in the city. Don't look back, Frank. Focus on the grip. Her hand helping me on a difficult step but shaking a little. But the dreams come regularly, 2 or 3 a week. Pale eyes between logs, the machete whistling close to my neck, the blow to the hood echoing like thunder in my chest. I wake up sweating, my heart racing as if I were being chased, and I get up to drink water in the dark kitchen, checking my phone for group messages. Everyone okay? At midnight. Leo replies first. Yes, you. Mark. I dream about the bird. Damn. Chloe. Therapy helps. Talk to someone. The local press covered the incident a week later. A short article in the Oregonian. Hikers report armed stalker in Willamette. Police find nothing. With no names or details, just 4 men from Portland to protect identities. Leo saved the clipping. Proof, at least. But it's not enough. The void of his why is the real horror. The abyss of a mind that emerges from the forest without warning and decides to stalk strangers out of territory or madness. Leaving a broken bird and an X on a tree as his signature, we investigate on our own. Leo found hiker forums with threads from 2019. Weird guy in Deer Creek. He looked at me like he was sizing me up. Chloe called rangers. Reports of intruder, but no arrests. Mark. Maybe he ran away. But on my urban walks through Forest Park, every shadow on the Willamette River is his silhouette raising his machete, whispering "run" in the wind, and I know the forest holds more. Not ghosts, but broken men waiting for the next group, the next empty clearing. Camp Star Lake had always been my summer. 3 years in a row breathing pine air, telling stories around the campfire, and watching city kids discover the world beyond a screen. This year, I'd even been promoted to senior counselor. I had my own cabin, the Beavers, a group of 10-year-olds full of energy and questions. It was the perfect job, until it wasn't. It all started with Liam's disappearance. Liam was a new counselor, a quiet, slightly awkward guy who was in charge of the Falcons. He wore thick glasses, didn't talk much, and always had a book in his backpack. He wasn't popular, but he wasn't a problem either. He was just there. He disappeared one night in July, after the children had gone to sleep. He was simply not there in the morning. His backpack, his sleeping bag, everything was still in his cabin. Even his sneakers were lined up next to the bed, as if waiting for him to put them on again. It was as if he had been swallowed up by the earth. The official reaction was swift and orderly. The director, Mr. Henderson, a man with a politician's smile and an iron fist, called the police before breakfast. "I don't want any panic," he said to the counselors gathered in the dining room, his voice calm and authoritative. "Liam is an adult. He may have had a family emergency. Let's act with discretion." They searched the woods. They dredged part of the lake. They found nothing. The theory that leaked out was that Liam, overwhelmed by responsibility, had decided to leave and start over somewhere else. It was a plausible explanation, but it didn't smell right. I shared the counselor's cabin with 3 others. Jenna, the textbook counselor, always with a smile and a song. Marco, the sports guy, muscular and a few words. Sarah, the assistant director, efficient and a little cold. After the disappearance, I noticed a change in them. It wasn't something I could point to. It was more subtle. A dull tension, like the hum of a transformer before it explodes. Jenna no longer sang in the shower. Marco avoided looking me in the eye. Sarah, who used to take notes at every meeting, now just nodded silently. Her lips pressed tightly together. And the conversations. If I walked into the cabin, they would stop abruptly. Once, I heard Marco say, "We shouldn't have." But when he saw me, he finished with, "We shouldn't have forgotten the repellent. The mosquitoes are worse than ever." It was a clumsy lie. And I believed it, because I wanted to believe it. The first crack appeared during my first night watch after the incident. The rule was simple. Walk between the cabins every hour, make sure everything was calm. That night, with a flashlight and my heart still a little heavy from what had happened to Liam, I began my rounds. The Beaver's cabin, mine, was quiet. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I went to the Falcons, now temporarily in charge of Marco. I shone my light gently through the window. The sleeping bags were puffed up, heads visible, everything in order. Until I noticed a detail. Tommy, a small red-haired boy, always slept in the bed in the corner, next to the window. That night, there was a dark-haired boy with short hair in his place. I shrugged. Maybe they had switched. Kids do that kind of thing. The next night, in Jenna's squirrel cabin, it happened again. A girl who always slept near the door was now in the middle. Small shifts, as if someone were rearranging a set of living furniture. I mentioned it to Jenna the next morning at breakfast. "The kids," she said, spreading butter on toast with a calmness that seemed forced to me. "Oh, sometimes they have nightmares. They get scared and snuggle up with a friend. It's nothing, Leo. Don't worry." But I did worry, because that night during my rounds, I saw Marco. He was coming out of the beaver's cabin, my cabin. It wasn't his turn on duty. He was carrying an unlit flashlight. When he saw me, he froze for a second, then gave a tense smile. "Hey, Leo, just checking. Henderson wants us to be more alert after what happened to Liam, you know." I nodded, saying nothing. My skin crawled. Checking what? The kids were fine. I'd checked on them 10 minutes earlier. Paranoia began to take root, silent and poisonous. I started sleeping less, listening to every creak in the counselor's cabin. My co-workers, once friends, became potential accomplices. Their laughter sounded fake to me. Their questions about my well-being felt like probes. "Are you sleeping well, Leo?" Sarah asked me one day as we handed out lunches. "Yes, of course," I lied. "It's just that you look tired." "It's the heat," I said, forcing a smile, but in my head the question echoed, "What do you know?" That's when I remembered the cameras. The camp had a basic security system. Cameras at the main entrances and, most importantly, one in the dining hall hallway that from a certain angle captured part of the cabin area. The monitor on duty had access to that night's recordings on an old tablet in case any mischief occurred. I waited for my next shift. A couple of nights later, I sent Marco on his rounds. "I need you to cover the west side," and I said with a smile that hurt my face. "I think I heard something there." He nodded, unsuspecting. As soon as he left, I locked myself in the small guard office. With trembling hands, I turned on the tablet and rewound the recording from the night Liam disappeared. There wasn't much to see. The dining room was empty, the hallway in shadows. Until 1:17 a.m. Then, a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. It was Liam. He was heading toward the back exit that led to the woods. He was walking, not running. He didn't seem distressed. Minutes later, another figure, larger, appeared and followed him. I couldn't see the face, just a broad silhouette, like Marco's. My heart was pounding. I rewound the following nights, jumping to the hours when I was on duty. And there he was, Marco, night after night, entering different cabins, not just checking. He would stand motionless next to the beds, watching the children sleep, the flashlight off, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 10. It was creepy. And then one night, after entering the beaver's cabin, the camera caught him coming out and looking directly into the lens, as if he knew I was there, as if he were looking at me through time and the screen. It wasn't just the kids, it was me. Panic was a metallic taste in my mouth. What was going on? Did Marco have something to do with Liam's disappearance? What about the others? Did Jenna, with her perpetual smile, know? Was Sarah, efficient Sarah, covering it up? I became a ghost at camp. I performed my duties like an automaton, but my mind was a whirlwind of wild theories and pure fear. I started taking notes in a notebook hidden under my pillow. Times, movements, fragments of conversations. Jenna to Marco, "You have to be more careful." Sarah burning papers in the campfire after the kids fell asleep. Henderson asked me if I was sleeping well. His smile didn't reach his eyes. One afternoon, I found Tommy, the redhead from my cabin, crying by the lake. "What's wrong, man?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "The big man," he sobbed. "He comes at night. Look, sometimes. He moves things." "What things, Tommy?" "The beds. Us. He says it's a game, but I don't like it. He makes the other man go away." I froze. The big man was Marco. The other man was Liam. That was the last straw. I couldn't wait any longer. I gathered my notes, my shaky conviction, and went to see Mr. Henderson. I told him everything. The bed changes. Marco prowling around at night. What Tommy had said. Henderson listened, his fingers interlaced on the desk. When I finished, he sighed. Leo, he said, his voice trying to be fatherly. You're very tired. The Liam thing has affected you more than you realize. I've seen the recordings, I insisted, my voice shrill, desperate. He's getting into the cabins. Marco is under my orders, Henderson said, his voice a thread of steel. He's been keeping extra watch on the cabins since the Liam thing. He's a little enthusiastic, I know. It's not enthusiasm. He's watching the children. Tommy saw him. Kids have imaginations, he cut in, standing up. And you need rest. I suggest you take a couple of days off for your own good. It was a rejection, a perfect cover. They were all in on it, all of them. That night, paranoia erupted into outright madness. My watch was hell. Every shadow was Marco, every whisper a conspiracy. I decided to make one final round to confront him. I gripped my flashlight so tightly that my knuckles hurt. As I passed the monitor's cabin, I heard voices. It was Jenna and Sarah. It can't go on like this, Jenna said, her voice trembling. Henderson says that if Leo doesn't calm down. I knew we couldn't trust someone from outside, Sarah replied. What happened to Liam was an accident, but an accident. They admitted it. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. I couldn't breathe. They had killed Liam. And now, I knew too much. I ran into the woods, aimlessly. I had to escape. I had to get to the police, to someone. My feet sank into the damp earth, branches whipping my face. I heard footsteps behind me, voices calling my name. Leo, stop! Was it real? Or was it my mind, completely breaking down? I don't know. The last thing I remember is tripping over a root, the sharp blow to my head, and then darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. I had a concussion and was severely dehydrated. They told me they found me at the edge of the lake, delirious. The official report said I had suffered a psychotic breakdown due to stress and guilt over my partner's disappearance. They never found Liam. The camp continued, with Marco, Jenna, and Sarah as exemplary counselors. I was fired for mental health issues. Sometimes I still wonder, did I imagine it all? Did the pressure and fear make me construct a conspiracy where there was only bad luck and coincidence? Was Marco just a weird guy with bad habits? Was Henderson just a carefree director? But then I close my eyes and see Marco's gaze in the camera fixed on me. And I hear Tommy's sobbing. And I remember the muffled words, what happened to Liam was an accident. The truth was lost in the depths of Star Lake, and I was left with the broken pieces of my sanity and the terrifying certainty that sometimes the monster is not just one person. It is the complicit silence of many, an accepted lie, and the ease with which they declare insane anyone who dares to point out the rot beneath the fresh paint. I no longer know what is real. I only know that I'm afraid, and that, in my nightmares, there's always a big man standing in the dark, watching me sleep.